Huge thanks to Narior 6712 and Jonchung 8 for providing spirit stones to support this series. Han Li was stunned beyond belief as he witnessed the scenes unfolding before him, and only after a long while did he return to his senses, upon which he exclaimed to himself, "This eye was left behind by a Tao ancestor." Even after he withdrew his mantra-treasured axis, Han Li was still reeling from the astonishing sight that he had just witnessed. He hadn't heard of any lightning Tao ancestor before, and this lightning Kui had most likely been the previous one. With its innate lightning physique, it was able to reign supreme over all of the lightning under the heavens, but as its powers grew, it was ultimately unable to escape the fate of being devoured by the heavenly Tao. This lightning eye was the last thing that the lightning Kui had forcibly left behind in the true immortal realm, before it was devoured by the heavenly Tao. Han Li channeled his spirit refinement technique to inspect the lightning eye, and he discovered that the power that it contained was even more immense than he had imagined. But all of it had been converted into pure lightning energy, and not a trace of the lightning Kui's will was left behind. This made sense, considering that if the lightning Kui had managed to preserve some of its will, then it would have begun cultivating again and left this place long ago. On top of that, there was no way that the heavenly Tao would have left its spiritual sense behind. After staring at the giant eye for a moment, he suddenly snapped his fingers, releasing a golden light barrier that proliferated outward rapidly to encompass the entire lightning sea. At the same time, Han Li channeled his great 5 elemental illusion mantra, and his 5-time law treasure manifestations emerged to surround the lightning sea. As soon as his oneness tier spirit domain was summoned, the lightning sea immediately began to resist with all its might, while the orange eye turned to glower intently at Han Li. The entire lightning sea had become more violent than ever, and countless pillars of lightning came crashing down from above like an endless waterfall to challenge Han Li's spirit domain. However, Han Li remained completely unfazed, and time in the surrounding space fell completely still at his behest, while the descending pillars of lightning were also instantly immobilized. Within his spirit domain, he was the only one able to move freely. As he strode through the air, his 70 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords appeared behind him before following along. He walked a lap around the eye of the lightning Kui, stopping once every few steps to plant an azure bamboo cloud swarm sword in midair. The lap around the giant eye took precisely 360 steps, and by then, all of the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords had already taken up their positions around the eye. Han Li carefully examined the positioning of the swords to ensure that they were in the right places, then flipped a hand over to produce a pristine white, octagonal jade plate. The jade plate was none other than the diagram for the almighty sword formation. During these past years of seclusion, Han Li had studied the formation diagram extensively, and as his cultivation base progressed, he was finally able to unravel all of its secrets. He had originally thought that the formation diagram had to have been refined by the founding father of the Almighty Sword sect, but since then, he had discovered that the diagram was far too profound to have possibly been a man-made artifact. Instead, it was a profound heavenly item manifested by the laws of swords. The sword formation possessed no attributes, yet could take on any attribute depending on the flying swords used, and that was because it harbored the laws of swords, thereby allowing it to harness the power of other attributes. At this moment, all of Han Li's azure bamboo cloud swarm swords had been used to set up an extremely powerful refinement sword formation in the almighty sword formation, and Han Li was planning to use the formation diagram to refine this eye. After all of the preparations were complete, Han Li made a hand seal as he began chanting an incantation, and a faint buzzing sound rang out as the patterns on the octagonal jade plate began to glow radiantly, forming a giant projection of an octagonal plate above the eye of the lightning Kui. Han Li rose up into the air before sitting down with his legs crossed at the center of the plate projection, and countless sword projections shot out of it at his behest before raining down upon the giant eye below. At the same time, all 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords began radiating dazzling golden light, which came together to form an enormous cauldron projection, with the eye of lightning Kui encompassed within. The octagonal plate projection formed by the formation plate served as a lid to seal the cauldron, and bursts of thunderous rumbling rang out as a layer of golden light surfaced over the eye of the lightning Kui, while all of the lightning churning within the clouds outside the cauldron suddenly subsided. In the next instant, a series of lightning Kui projections emerged from the eye, and arcs of incredibly pure, golden lightning were flashing around them as they crashed against the inner wall of the cauldron projection. With each collision came a deafening boom, while a violent shudder would run through the entire lightning sea. Seated on the octagonal plate projection, Han Li was also trembling violently from the repeated impacts of the lightning Kui projections, and he was also being struck by tiny arcs of lightning that were bursting out of the cauldron, but he couldn't allow himself even the slightest lapse in concentration. Otherwise, if the lightning Kui were to burst out, not only would the entire cauldron be destroyed, the lightning sea and the two nearby continents would also be ravaged by an unprecedented lightning storm that would erase them from the face of the northern glacial Immortal region. All of a sudden, Han Li let loose a thunderous roar, and countless sword projections erupted out of his 72 flying swords and sword formation diagram before surging into the cauldron. Ali. Meanwhile, on the edge of the primordial wave continent, countless gray realm beings were gathered together on the coastline like a swarm of locusts, looking out at the lighting sea in the distance. Standing at the forefront of the gray realm beings were several hundred gray realm cultivators, led by a tall man clad in a suit of rusty, copper armor. Standing behind him was a short and thin black-robed elderly man, who asked in a hoarse voice, "Should we go and see what's happening, Master Moshi?" "There's no need for that. Whatever it is that's out there, it's not something that we can deal with, so as long as it doesn't come after us, it would be best for us to leave it alone," the tall man by the name of Moshi replied with a shake of his head, and the black-robed elderly man gave an affirmative response. "Make sure to keep everyone in check so that they don't go looking for trouble. Are there any cities on the primordial wave continent that are still yet to be conquered? We're going to have to pick up the pace," Moshi instructed. Ali. Several months flew by in a flash. At this point, the lightning sea had undergone a massive transformation, having been reduced to no more than several dozen kilometers in size. Within what little remained of the lightning clouds, Han Li was walking around the cauldron that contained the eye of the lightning Kui with a rather frustrated look on his face. "The refinement is already complete, so why can't I break it open?" Inside the cauldron, the orange eye had been reduced to a size of a longan, and there were arcs of golden lightning flashing incessantly over it. The eye was surrounded by Han Li's 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, all of which had shrunk down by around half, and they were all connected by arcs of lightning, making it appear as if they were a single, unified entity. By Han Li's estimates, his 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords would all evolve into fourth-tier immortal treasures after having the power of the lightning Kui eye refined into them by his refinement sword formation. But for some reason, even though the refinement process was complete, the eye of the lightning Kui refused to break down. As a result, Han Li was unable to infuse its power into his swords. What is the problem? What am I missing? Right at this moment, a thought suddenly occurred to him, and an ecstatic look appeared on his face as he flipped a hand over to summon his profound heavenly gourd. Having absorbed the residual law powers of the profound heavenly spirit/sword, the gourd currently contained the laws of destruction, which were perfect to help him break open this lightning QEI. However, a hesitant look then appeared on Han Li's face. Even though the eye had already been refined, it was still something that had been left behind by a Tao ancestor, so it contained immense lightning power, perhaps too much for the profound heavenly gourd to bear. However, after some further contemplation, he couldn't think of a better course of action other than to also send his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords into the gourd to help suppress the lightning QEI. With that in mind, he didn't hesitate any longer, and the cauldron dissipated into nothingness at his behest to expose the eye and his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords. All of the residual lightning clouds in the area instantly began to churn violently as a cacophony of deafening thunderclaps rang out. In response, Han Li hurriedly raised his profound heavenly gourd, then thrust a palm into its underside, and a cloud of green mist instantly emerged from its opening to form a misty vortex. A burst of tremendous suction force erupted out of the vortex, and the lightning QEI and Han Li's azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were sucked in a flash, upon which the lightning and thunder in the surrounding lightning clouds instantly began to subside. After the lightning QEI and the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were sucked into the profound heavenly gourd, Han Li instantly sealed its opening, then began to gently shake it from side to side. A dull thunderclap instantly rang out from within the gourd, while countless arcs of golden lightning sprang out of its surface, only to be instantly quelled by Han Li. It was also in the same instant that a loud crack rang out, and a tiny crack appeared on the gourd's surface. Immediately thereafter, countless more cracks emerged over the entire gourd, and Han Li immediately tossed it up into the air without any hesitation. He then reached out toward the gourd with both hands, releasing thin, golden threads formed by his time law powers to bind the gourd, and it was as if a radiant, golden outer garment had been conjured up around it. With the fortification of Han Li's time law powers, the severely cracked profound heavenly gourd was somehow able to hold itself intact, but the runes on its surface were glowing brighter and brighter. Han Li peered into the gourd with his infernal devilish eyes to discover that his 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were all pressed tightly against the inner wall of the gourd, still maintaining the refinement sword formation, while the lightning QEI was enveloped in a ball of dark green light while hovering at the center of the gourd. The dark green light and the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were doing everything in their power to contain the lightning QEI's overwhelming might, and neither side was willing to back down. In terms of overall power, the lightning QEI naturally held the upper hand. The arcs of lightning that were constantly springing out of it had already completely destroyed the gourd, which would have fallen apart long ago without the support of Han Li's time law powers. However, the dark green light coupled with the sword formation were just barely able to keep its power contained, resulting in an impasse. After several hours of this, the profound heavenly gourd was finally unable to bear the pressure any longer, and it exploded violently with a deafening boom. A burst of dark green light erupted out of the gourd, then transformed into a streak of dark green sword light that parted the sea and the heavens, creating a vast spatial rift that was giving off astonishingly formidable spatial fluctuations. As for the eye of the lightning QE, it had disintegrated into a vast expanse of dazzling, golden radiance during the explosion, and there were countless lightning QE projections running rampant within the golden light. The azure bamboo cloud swarm swords that had been scattered throughout the surrounding area instantly plunged headfirst into the ball of golden light, causing it to become so bright that even Han Li was unable to see what was happening inside. However, he could sense some type of peculiar energy fluctuations within the golden radiance, and all of a sudden, streaks of sword light came erupting out of it in all directions. One of the streaks of sword light had flown straight into the closing spatial rift, and an alarmed look appeared on Han Li's face as he hurriedly reached into the gaping rift before pulling his arm back in a forceful motion. His right sleeve was instantly torn to shreds, but his arm remained completely unscathed, and to his surprise, he was holding onto a tiny green hand rather than an azure bamboo cloud swarm sword. Immediately thereafter, all of the surrounding streaks of sword light shot back to his side, and all of them landed on his body before transforming into tiny, green figures that were each around a foot in height. Several of them were standing on his shoulders, several more had climbed onto his head. There were also quite a few swinging back and forth while hanging from his arms, and there was even one that was standing on his nose, staring into his eyes with a pair of tiny eyes of its own. These tiny figures were all entirely green in color, with only their hair and eyes taking on a golden coloration, and around each of their ankles and wrists was a golden band with fine, golden lightning patterns etched upon them. Han Li counted them one by one to discover that there were precisely 72 of them, and an intrigued look appeared on his face at this discovery. Could it be that my azure bamboo cloudswarm swords have given rise to sword spirits after absorbing the power of the lightning QEI? As if the tiny, green figures were able to read his mind, as soon as this question occurred to him, all of them rose up into the air to form 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords. However, in contrast with the azure bamboo cloudswarm swords of old, all of these flying swords were riddled with golden lightning patterns, and their auras indicated that they had become third-tier immortal treasures, an entire tier above what Han Li had anticipated. While it was only a single tier of difference, there was an unfathomable gulf in power between third and fourth-tier immortal treasures, not to mention that there were 72 of them. Furthermore, the 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords were now so in sync with him that it was as if they had become extensions of his body, and they instantly rose up into the air to form an incredibly powerful sword formation, even without the need for any explicit mental instructions. A rumbling thunderclap rang out as a gargantuan heavenly gate appeared in the sky, and even though the gates were tightly shut, there was an irrepressible lightning aura seeping out of it, one that even Han Li felt rather wary of. All of a sudden, the giant, golden gate began rumbling violently, and there was a golden sea inside, within which were countless lightning worms of all types of different colors, ready to burst out of the gate as soon as they were called upon. The space around the heavenly gate was trembling from its awesome might, and large rifts were beginning to appear. A pleased smile appeared on Han Li's face, and the golden heavenly gate slowly swung shut at his behest before fading away. The 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords reverted back into miniature, green children before descending toward him, and Han Li whisked them away with a sweep of his sleeve. After that, Han Li opened the flower branch domain, in which Violet Spirit was waiting for him in the bamboo pavilion. How did it go? A hesitant look appeared on Han Li's face as he replied, "Everything went smoothly. Go do what you need to do," Violet Spirit said with a warm smile. "If possible, I'd like to accompany you." "It's too dangerous. I can't take you to the heavenly court with me," Han Li said with a shake of his head. Violet Spirit seemed to have already anticipated this answer, and she replied, "I understand. I'll wait for you to come back. In any case, I'll take you to the underworld first. Once there, you can choose to stay there or travel to Devil Realm, and I'll come find you once I'm done," Han Li said. "All right," Violet Spirit replied with a nod. After the two of them left the flower branch domain, Han Li conjured up a lightning teleportation formation around them, and they departed from the lightning sea. 1 month later. In the underworld, A black-robed woman was packing back and forth in an agitated manner in front of the stone palace on the island at the center of the Yellow Springs. The two ghostly generals stationed in front of the palace's entrance exchanged a glance with one another, then returned to standing in a stationary manner. Worm 3 had already been packing in front of the stone palace nonstop for around half a month, and it seemed that she was waiting for someone. The two of them had tried to convince her to take a rest on multiple occasions, but to no avail, and they eventually stopped trying. Right at this moment, a streak of golden light suddenly appeared in the distance, and it was racing toward the island, completely unaffected by the Six Paths gale winds. Worm 3 was ecstatic to see this, and in the next instant, Han Li and Violet Spirit were already standing before her. "Where's the palace master?" Han Li asked. "Let's go in first," Worm 3 replied with a hesitant expression. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, then entered the palace with Violet Spirit. After the palace gates swung shut, Worm 3 wasted no time as she revealed, "Father has already set off for the Middle-earth Immortal region." "What, why?" Han Li asked. "Father has been feeling very guilty for what happened to Mother, and on top of that, there were some other factors that contributed to his decision to make a move earlier than initially planned. From now on, the entire true immortal realm is only going to become more and more chaotic. Father said that even though the Heavenly Court has promised to release my mother as soon as he arrives in the Middle-earth Immortal region, things definitely won't be so simple. He's gone to great lengths to try and find out where my mother is being held captive, but to no avail. However, in the process, he managed to find out who it was that captured my mother," Worm 3 replied. "Who is it?" Han Li asked. "Feng Qingshui. I'm sure you're aware of him," Worm 3 replied. A thoughtful look appeared in Han Li's eyes upon hearing this. Han Li had encountered Feng Qingshui once back in the Gray Realm, and he knew that the latter was the Water Dao ancestor. "I want all of the information that you have on him, including his background, the location of his immortal manor, where he is right now, and records of his past battles," Han Li demanded. "Are you going to go after him?" Worm 3 asked as she raised an eyebrow. "Your father told you to tell me that it was Feng Qingshui who captured Wanner precisely so that I would go after him, did he not?" Han Li asked. "Father didn't say anything about that. The problem is that Feng Qingshui is a Dao ancestor, while you—" Han Li wasted no time with words as he revealed his cultivation base to Worm 3, and in that instant, it was as if the entire sky had fallen upon the island. However, he made sure to restrict his aura to only within a radius of 1,000 feet around him, and in that area, he was like an omnipotent deity, able to control everything on a whim. Worm 3 stumbled back involuntarily in the face of Han Li's almighty aura, and she was momentarily stunned into silence. After taking a deep breath to compose herself, she said, "It's incredible that you were able to make such significant strides in such a short time. No wonder, Father." Her voice trailed off there, as if she had decided against saying what she was about to say. "With him drawing most of the Heavenly Court's attention, this will be the perfect time for me to go after Feng Qingshui. I just hope that he's not at the Heavenly Court right now," Han Li said as he suppressed his own aura again. "Fortunately for you, he's currently in the Dragon Abyss Immortal region, where he's been cultivating in seclusion for some time in the Mist Dragon sect that he founded," Worm 3 revealed. "That's perfect. I'll set off tomorrow," Han Li said. "All right, I'll come with you," Worm 3 said. "No, you're not," Han Li rejected flatly. "Why can't I go, my mother? She chose to be Nangong Wan, so she's not your mother, and I'm sure she also wouldn't want you to come with me," Han Li interjected. "I don't care how you see it. In my eyes, she is my mother, so I have to go," Worm 3 insisted. "You won't be able to help me at your current cultivation base, And I also need you to escort Violet's spirit to the Devil Realm for me," Han Li said in a frank and straightforward manner, making no effort to spare Worm 3's feelings. And sure enough, her face fell slightly upon hearing this. "You're right, I'll only be a hindrance if I go with you, but why is Violet's spirit going to the Devil Realm?" she asked in a perplexed manner. "Has something happened?" Han Li asked. "Are you not aware of what's happened in the Devil Realm? If Violet's spirit intends to go and find Shi Chuankong, then I suggest she change her plans," Worm 3 said. Violet's spirit's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and a sense of foreboding welled up in her heart. "What happened?" Han Li asked. "A civil war has been raging in the Devil Realm for over 1,000 years at this point, and it's been particularly brutal the past century or so. Everything came to a head 7 years ago, during a battle in which the entirety of Night Sun City was destroyed, while the Scalptia spatial domain was also completely erased from existence. Shi Chuankong and Shi Kongji were subjected to a heavy defeat," Worm 3 explained. "Are they still alive?" Han Li asked. "The Devil Realm is currently completely sealed off to the outside world, so it's very difficult to find out any information. However, according to our sources, Shi Kongji was killed in battle against the devilish monarch, while Shi Chuankong has gone missing, and it's unclear whether he's dead or alive," Worm 3 replied. Han Li fell silent at this piece of grim news. "Has there still been no news even 7 years after the battle?" Violet's spirit asked. "The devilish monarch personally issued an order to seal off the Devil Realm, and he hasn't specified when it'll open to the outside world again, so no new information has come out," Worm 3 replied with a shake of her head. "I'll go to the Devil Realm to find out what's happened once I'm back from the Heavenly Court," Han Li said with a grim expression, and Worm 3 nodded in response. "Seeing as the Devil Realm is no longer safe or accessible, you can wait for me in the underworld instead," Han Li said to Violet's spirit, who gave a concerned nod. "By the way, do you know where Weeping Soul is right now?" Han Li asked. "She went to the Soulfall Abyss," Worm 3 replied. "Where's that?" Han Li asked. "It's one of the perilous places in the underworld, somewhere that even my father has never set foot in. She says that the great Tao that she's searching for is there, and I warned her about how dangerous a place it is, but she still insisted on going, nevertheless," Worm 3 replied. "How long has it been since she went there?" Han Li asked. "She set off over a century ago, and she's still yet to return," Worm 3 replied. Han Li closed his eyes upon hearing this, and a speck of white light emerged over his glabella momentarily, following which he reopened his eyes. "Is she all right?" Violet's spirit asked. "I don't know. Our spiritual connection has been severed," Han Li replied. "It's said that the Soulfall Abyss is a place in which all spiritual connections are rendered null. Even if you were standing in the abyss right next to her, you wouldn't be able to sense her," Worm 3 said. "This is the path that Weeping Soul chose, so you should trust her," Violet's spirit said as she latched onto Han Li's hand, and he could only give a resigned nod. Weeping Soul and Jin Tong each had their own paths to walk, just as he was on a path that would bring him in direct opposition to the Heavenly Court. "I'll set off for the Dragon Abyss Immortal region tomorrow. Make sure to have all of the information on Feng Qingshui ready by then," Han Li said to Worm 3. That night, Han Li and Violet's spirit were laying together on the rooftop of the stone palace on the island, gazing up at the stars. Unfortunately, it was a rather cloudy night, so there were very few visible stars, and even the moon had been concealed. Han Li turned his gaze to Violet's spirit, and her heartbreakingly beautiful features were gently illuminated by the hazy moonlight, further accentuating her allure. Han Li had always harbored some guilt in his heart when it came to Violet's spirit. To him, she was every bit as important as Nangong Wan, but fate always seemed to have a way of keeping them apart. With that in mind, He couldn't help but reach out to stroke her cheek as he began. "Violet Spirit, I—" "There's no need to say anything," Violet Spirit interjected as she continued to look up at the sky. "I'm already content just staying with you in peace like this." A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. Moments later, Violet Spirit grabbed onto one of Han Li's arms, then tucked it behind her own head as a pillow. "Make sure to be careful and bring back Big Sister Wanner safe and sound. I'll be here awaiting your return," Violet Spirit said. Han Li looked down at Violet Spirit, who had buried her face against his chest, and it felt a little strange. In his mind, she had always been a very independent and strong-willed woman, and she very rarely displayed such a delicate side to herself. "Do you want to know what I saw in my previous life through the Six Paths reincarnation plate?" Violet Spirit asked. "What did you see?" Han Li asked. He had always wanted to ask the question, but he didn't want to pressure Violet Spirit into sharing what she had seen. "My previous life was very uneventful. I was a mortal woman in a mortal realm with no spirit roots, and I only lived for about a century. I waited for someone my entire life, from my prime years all the way until my grave, but that person never appeared," Violet Spirit recounted. Her voice trailed off there as she looked straight into Han Li's eyes. Entranced by her beauty, he gently wound an arm around her as he stroked her long and silky hair. Violet Spirit continued to rest against his chest as she murmured, "That's why I already feel very fulfilled in this lifetime. I've managed to meet the person that I waited an entire lifetime for, so what regrets could I possibly have?" Han Li looked into her eyes, and they were more beautiful than any of the stars in the sky, a breathtaking sight that he felt like he would never grow weary of. Right at this moment, a gust of wind suddenly swept past, pushing a dark cloud along to conceal the final glimmer of moonlight. The entire island was plunged into darkness, and shortly thereafter it began to rain. The rain of the underworld was different from that of the true, immortal realm, in that it was tinged with the ghostly chi that was pervasive in this environment. It wasn't necessarily harmful, but it was certainly not pleasant either. Han Li didn't want this rare moment of peace to be interrupted, so he raised a hand as he prepared to sweep the dark clouds away, only for Violet Spirit to latch onto his arm as she said in a barely audible voice, "Let's go back. You don't want to stay a little long." Han Li's voice abruptly cut off as he noticed that Violet Spirit had turned as red as a beetroot, and he instantly understood her intentions. He reached one arm around her back while supporting the crook of her knees with the others, gently lifting her up from the rooftop before carrying her into the stone palace. The storm over the island gradually picked up in ferocity as the night deepened. It rained the entire night, fluctuating between a light sprinkle and a heavy downpour. A storm had also been raging in the palace the entire night, albeit one of a much more romantic nature. The rain finally subsided in the morning, and Han Li awakened from his slumber to stare at the still sound asleep Violet Spirit. His gaze lingered on her for a very long time, and he opened his mouth to say something on multiple occasions, but couldn't find the words. In the end, he could only heave a faint sigh. He got out of bed and put on a new, fresh azure robe, then stood beside the bed in silence before finally turning to depart. On the bed, Violet Spirit's eyelashes fluttered ever so slightly as a tear slid down a cheek, leaving behind a barely visible trail. Upon reaching the door, Han Li took one final glance back at Violet Spirit, then left the room before gently closing the door behind him. The flame of the candle in the room flickered momentarily before falling still again. By the time he reached the entrance of the palace, Gan Jiuzhen was already waiting for him. "Is everything ready?" Han Li asked. "Where's Violet Spirit? Is she not going to see you off?" Gan Jiuzhen asked. "We already said our farewells last night," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. Gan Jiajun didn't pry any further as she flipped a hand over to produce a palm-sized token and a black jade slip, both of which she handed to Han Li. "Why are you giving me this Bodhi token?" Han Li asked. The Dragon Abyss Immortal region is one of the 36 large immortal regions, and you can travel directly to the Middle-earth Immortal region from there. With this Bodhi token, you can say that you're traveling to the Middle-earth Immortal region to take part in the Bodhi banquet, and that'll be more effective than any passport, Gan Jiajun explained. "That's very thoughtful of you," Han Li replied with a nod. "This was all planned out by my father in advance. The Jade Slip lays out how you can travel to the Dragon Abyss Immortal region, as well as some information on Feng Qingshui. I hope it can be of help to you," Gan Jiajun said. She then paused momentarily before requesting in a solemn manner, "Please make sure to rescue my mother." "I will," Han Li replied with a nod, then vanished from the spot amid a flash of golden lightning, leaving Gan Jiajun to stare into space with a concerned look on her face. Not long after Han Li's departure, the Reincarnation Palace Master suddenly appeared beside Gan Jiajun, but it was only a projection of him. Gan Jiajun wasn't surprised to see this, and the Reincarnation Palace Master asked, "What do you think of him right now?" "He feels completely unfathomable to me right now. I've only ever felt an aura so vast whenever I've been in your presence. How has he become so powerful in such a short time?" Gan Jiajun asked. "He must have already severed his kind corpse soul, which means that his powers won't be inferior by much even compared with my own," the Reincarnation Palace Master replied with a smile. "You're saying he's already progressed to the late great encompassment stage in such a short time? How?" Gan Jiajun exclaimed. "I don't know how he did it, but one thing you have to remember is that the three paramount laws are referred to as such because they are closer to the essence of the heavenly Tao than all other laws. Once a cultivator of one of the three paramount laws has severed their wicked and kind corpse souls, they will begin to be able to draw upon the power of the heavenly Tao, granting them power on par with or even superior to that of the average Tao ancestor. As a cultivator of reincarnation law powers, that's something that you can also look forward to upon reaching the late great encompassment stage," the Reincarnation Palace Master explained. "Looks like I need to work even harder in my cultivation," Gan Jiajun said as she clenched her fists with a look of resolve in her eyes. Cultivating the paramount laws comes with significant benefits over cultivating other law powers, but it's a very difficult path to pursue, and it becomes even more difficult at the great encompassment stage. There are countless cultivators across the true immortal realm who have attempted to walk such a path, but very few succeed. It's extremely important not to become overly ambitious and bite off more than you can chew, the Reincarnation Palace Master cautioned. "Yes, Father," Gan Jiajun replied in a sheepish manner. "If you wish to further your cultivation, I suggest you go and travel through some mortal realms for inspiration," the Reincarnation Palace Master said. "How is that going to help?" Gan Jiajun asked in a puzzled manner. "One of the keys to severing one's kind corpse soul is to understand the true meaning of kindness. Unfortunately, many cultivators lose sight of the meaning and importance of kindness over the course of their long cultivation journeys, and it's often the case that traveling through the mortal realms can allow one to reawaken the kindness in their heart," the Reincarnation Palace Master explained. A thoughtful look appeared on Gan Jiajun's face upon hearing this. "Those who live pure and kind lives are blessed with positive reciprocation when their souls enter the cycle of reincarnation. Even though I am able to control the 6 paths of reincarnation, it's not easy for me to alter the fates of those who have led lives of great kindness," the Reincarnation Palace Master continued. "I see. Are you really going to do as Gu Huijin says, Father?" Gan Jiajun asked. "A battle between our Reincarnation Palace and the Heavenly Court is inevitable. Your mother has already been captured, So you must remain safe no matter what, Jiuzhen, the Reincarnation Palace Master said in a gentle voice. I want to go and rescue Mother with you, Gan Jiuzhen said. No, you are to stay here and not stray a single step from this island, the Reincarnation Palace Master said in a stern manner. This was the first time that she had seen the Reincarnation Palace Master with such a stern expression, and she shuddered slightly in response, but her resolve didn't waver. Only when you're safe can I focus fully on dealing with the Heavenly Court. Leave your mother to me and Han Li. The Reincarnation Palace Master sighed as he patted Gan Jiuzhen on the shoulder, then vanished into thin air. In the wake of his departure, Gan Jiuzhen remained rooted to the spot in a slight daze for quite some time, before making her way deeper into the palace. Ali, Dragon Abyss Immortal Region, Sky Sea Continent, Mist Dragon City. The Dragon Abyss Immortal Region was extremely abundant with water sources. In fact, over 80% of the entire Immortal region was ocean, and the land only consisted of sparse islands dotted throughout the sea. The largest of those islands was the Sky Sea Continent, while Mist Dragon City was the largest city on the Sky Sea Continent. Mist Dragon City was a coastal city that had been strategically constructed at the junction of several continents, and it was vastly renowned across the entire Immortal region. However, what was even more renowned was the Mist Dragon sect that was situated outside Mist Dragon City. The Mist Dragon sect was a sect that had been around for countless years, and it had always been the #1 sect in the entire Immortal region. The most renowned cultivator in the history of the sect by a huge margin was none other than Feng Qingshui, whose Dao ancestor status only further cemented the sect's status as the dominant force in the Immortal region. At the center of Mist Dragon City was a plaza that was several dozen kilometers in size, and it was being patrolled by groups of blue-robed guards. All of these guards were outer sect disciples of the Mist Dragon sect, and they were responsible for maintaining order in Mist Dragon City. Not only was Mist Dragon City under the jurisdiction of the Mist Dragon sect, the same applies to the entire Sky Sea continent, making it very difficult even for the Dragon Abyss Immortal Palace to have much sway over the continent. At the center of the plaza was a huge, blue archway that reached all the way up to the clouds like a blue mountain. The archway was riddled with countless formation patterns that extended down to the plaza below, forming over 1,000 teleportation formations of different sizes, all of which were currently flashing. These teleportation formations were connected to many different immortal regions, and countless people came and went through them every single day. Right at this moment, a group of 6 figures emerged from one of the teleportation formations. 5 of them were chatting amicably with one another, while the 6th figure, an azure-robed man, appeared to have been a little distant from the group. Among the 5 cultivators, a blue-robed young woman took a deep breath, then exclaimed, "So this is Mist Dragon City. It's so majestic, and the world's origin chi here is so abundant as well. It's way better than our Eternal Sky Immortal region." Of course, the Dragon Abyss Immortal region is one of the 36 large immortal regions, so it's naturally much better than our Eternal Heaven Immortal region. It looks like we made the right decision to pool together all of our funds to purchase a teleportation token to this place, a black-robed elderly man said. As a golden immortal, he possessed the loftiest cultivation base of the 5, and it was clear that he was the leader of the group. Of course, we also have to thank fellow Taoist Han for chipping in. Otherwise, we would have still been short on funds, the elderly man said as he turned to the azure-robed man with a smile. "You're far too kind, fellow Taoist Huo. This was a mutually beneficial deal for all of us. The teleportation formation is able to teleport 6 people at once, so I also saved a lot of immortal origin stones by traveling with your group," the azure-robed man replied with a smile of his own. The black-robed elderly man turned his gaze back to his companions as he said, "Right now, we barely have any immortal origin stones between us, so there will undoubtedly be some hard times to come. Let's all work hard so that we can establish a foothold here as soon as possible." His four companions gave a collective, affirmative response. "Fellow Taoist Han, you're also a vagrant cultivator, so how about you join us as well? There's always more strength in numbers," the black-robed elderly man offered. "I have some private matters to attend to, so I'm afraid this is where we'll have to part ways. Good luck with your cultivation, fellow Taoists," the azure-robed man said as he cupped his fist in a parting salute. The black-robed elderly man was rather disappointed to hear this, but he didn't say anything further as he departed with his four companions. Meanwhile, the azure-robed man remained on the plaza as he began to inspect his surroundings. "Oi, you over there, don't loiter on the teleportation plaza. This isn't your backyard," a nearby guard yelled, but the azure-robed man simply ignored him. A furious look instantly appeared on the guard's face upon seeing this, and he was just about to detain the azure-robed man to administer a stern punishment when he suddenly stopped cold in his tracks. Even though the azure-robed man was merely standing still on the spot, the guard's soul had suddenly begun to tremble in his presence, leading him to reflexively stop in his tracks. The azure-robed man was none other than Han Li, and at this moment, he was scouring the surrounding area with his spiritual sense. The Dragon Abyss Immortal region was far more massive than the Crane Ridge Immortal region, so his spiritual sense was only able to encompass a small section of it. However, the entire Sky-Sea continent had still fallen within his spiritual sensory range, as was the entirety of the Mist Dragon sect. The only problem was that he wasn't able to detect the auras of either Nangong Wan or Feng Qingshui. Even though Feng Qingshui was a Tao ancestor, surely there was no way that he should have been able to remain hidden from his spiritual sense, given that he had now mastered all 7 levels of the spirit refinement technique. Could it be that I've been fed false information? After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li turned to the nearby guard, and a layer of murky light appeared in his eyes. The guard's eyes instantly became glazed over, and countless memories began flashing through his pupils in rapid succession, laying out his entire life for Han Li to see. Given Han Li's current mastery over the spirit refinement technique, he was now able to examine a high-zenith cultivator's memories with ease, as opposed to having to use intrusive soul search techniques. Through the guard's memories, Han Li was able to glean some information about Miss Dragon's sect, and with that, he instantly vanished from the spot. The dazed look in the guard's eyes instantly faded away, and he shuddered as he snapped back to his senses. "What the hell just happened?" the guard murmured to himself, and he felt as if there were a small gap in his memory. He looked around momentarily in a perplexed manner, then scratched his own head as he returned to his patrol duties. All of a sudden, Han Li appeared outside a peaceful palace in the Mist Dragon sect without any warning. There were 2 guards clad in suits of blue armor stationed on either side of the palace entrance, and both of them were at the late high zenith stage. Both of them were naturally very alarmed by Han Li's abrupt arrival, but before they had a chance to do anything, a faint glimmer of light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and they were instantly rooted to the spot in a statuesque manner. Han Li turned his gaze to the palace gates, which were tightly shut, with a layer of hazy blue light flashing over their surface, clearly indicating the presence of some formidable restriction. After examining the palace gates briefly, Han Li turned his gaze to the distance as he swept a sleeve through the air, and 72 tiny arcs of lightning sprang out of his sleeve before vanishing into the nearby space. In the next instant, 72 golden lightning swords emerged around the entire Sky-Sea continent to form an enormous encirclement. Arcs of golden lightning sprang out of the lightning swords, then intertwined with one another to form a dome-shaped lightning net that encompassed the entire continent. However, the lightning net was only visible for an instant before vanishing into thin air, immediately following which a blanket of dark clouds suddenly began to gather over the continent. The cultivators all over the continent quickly noticed what was happening in the sky, but they didn't think much of it. Given the climate and water-rich environment of the Dragon Abyss Immortal region, storms were a very common sight. After doing all of that, Han Li flew into the palace gates as a streak of golden light, and the restrictions on the gates instantly began glowing radiantly as it attempted to keep him at bay. However, the streak of golden light was able to pass through the restrictions and the gates without pause, and inside the palace was a thin elderly man seated on a cushion with his legs crossed. There was a projection of a blue flower that was around 10 feet in size hovering above the elderly man's head, and the petals of the flower were drifting through the palace while giving off a unique fragrance. All of a sudden, the elderly man's eyes sprang open, yet before he even had a chance to stand up, Han Li had already appeared in the palace. The elderly man reacted extremely quickly, and a burst of radiant, blue light erupted out of his body alongside a peak-great encompassment stage aura. A loud roar rang out from within his body, immediately following which a projection of a blue dragon that was 10,000 feet in size appeared around him. As soon as the dragon projection appeared, the elderly man's wizened body was instantly rejuvenated. His white hair turned an exuberant black, his skin became as fair as jade, and it was as if he had aged 50 years in reverse, while his aura had also become as violent and tumultuous as that of a combative dragon. The elderly man threw a punch at Han Li, and the blue dragon projection around him sprang forward with his fist. Countless cracks appeared throughout the space in the palace, but it didn't completely explode. It resembled a shattered piece of porcelain, but it was somehow able to hold itself together. At the same time, all of the restrictions throughout the Mist Dragon sect sprang into action, and the entire sect was basked in a sea of radiant blue light. All of the world's origin chi, within a radius of millions of kilometers, converged from all directions before surging into the sea of blue light, following which it was then funneled into the palace. The walls of the palace began radiating dazzling blue light, which converged toward Han Li like a turbulent wave, and it was more formidable an attack than the punch thrown by the elderly man. All of a sudden, everything in the palace had become incredibly heavy, as if it had suddenly been teleported to the seabed, millions of kilometers beneath the surface. All of this had taken place in the blink of an eye, but Han Li remained unfazed as he casually thrust a fist forward, and a giant, golden fist projection took shape before hurtling directly toward the elderly man. The fist projection appeared to have been completely unremarkable, and it wasn't even giving off any energy fluctuations. Yet it was able to tear through the oncoming dragon projection and waves of blue light with ease. A stunned look appeared on the elderly man's face upon seeing this, and he immediately turned to flee, only for the golden fist projection to instantly appear above him before unfurling into a palm and swooping down upon him. The elderly man let loose a desperate roar as he thrust both palms up toward the heavens. A resounding boom rang out as the entire palace trembled violently, and half of the elderly man's body had been smashed into the ground. He had reverted back to his elderly appearance, and blood was gushing out of his mouth in a frenzy. A finger appeared before him without any warning, then gently pressed itself against his forehead, and several translucent chains shot out of the fingertip before vanishing into his glabella. The elderly man instantly stiffened as his eyes glazed over, and he was hoisted out of the ground by Han Li, following which both of them vanished from the spot. The waves of blue light in the palace slowly dissipated, while the cracked space gradually healed. Right at this moment, 3 streaks of light landed outside the palace, containing a tall middle-aged man, a blue-robed young woman, and a child that was only around 3 feet tall. The middle-aged man and the blue-robed woman were both at the mid-great encompassment stage, while the child was a late-great encompassment cultivator. The 2 armor-clad guards stationed outside the palace were laying on the ground in an unconscious state, and that was certainly not an encouraging sight for the 3 figures. The 3 of them exchanged a glance with one another, following which the middle-aged man called out, "What's going on in there, sect leader?" There was no response. "Something must have happened. Let's go in," the blue-robed woman said, and the 3 of them promptly undid the restrictions on the palace gates before stepping inside. The interior of the palace was in a state of chaotic disarray, and all that remained of the sect leader was a puddle of blood on the ground. "It looks like our sect leader may have been abducted," the middle-aged man remarked with a grim expression, one that was mirrored on the faces of his 2 companions. "But sect leader Yang Shan is a peak great encompassment cultivator who could have possibly managed to abduct him in such a short time. Unless—" The blue-robed woman's voice trailed off into a grim silence as a harrowing possibility dawned upon her. "It had to have been a Tao ancestor," the child said, and even though his voice was very tender and childlike, it somehow sounded as if it belonged to someone with a much older appearance. "Surely not. Why would a Tao ancestor stoop to abducting a great encompassment cultivator?" the middle-aged man exclaimed. "Right now, the true immortal realm is in a very chaotic state, and there are many things happening that are out of the ordinary," the child mused. "What should we do, Elder Jai?" the middle-aged man asked as he turned to the child, as did the blue-robed woman. "Seeing as this matter most likely concerns a Tao ancestor, it's no longer something that we can take care of, so we'll have to notify our patriarch," the child replied. The middle-aged man and the blue-robed woman exchanged a glance with one another before nodding in agreement. Ali. Somewhere out in the boundless expanse of space was a ball of golden light that was around an acre in size, resembling a giant egg. However, the space within the ball of golden light was far larger than an acre in area, spanning dozens of kilometers in size, and it was complete with mountains, valleys, and forests. Sect leader Yang Shan had been set down onto the ground, and Han Li had pressed a palm down onto his head, attempting to search his soul. However, to his surprise and dismay, sect leader Yang Shan seemed to have cultivated some type of secret technique that combined all of his memories to form a strange, impermeable seal. This seal was closely connected to his soul, and it was extremely unstable, so if he were to try and search his soul by force, then his soul would instantly self-detonate. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li withdrew his palm before pressing several key points on sect leader Yang Shan's body to seal away his cultivation base, then tapped a finger against his glabella to withdraw the spiritual sense chains within. His eyes quickly came into focus, and as his gaze fell upon Han Li, he asked, "May I ask which Tao ancestor you are, senior, and why have you abducted me?" "There's no need to be so apprehensive, sect leader Yang Shan. I've only brought you here because I want to ask you some questions, and you'll be free to leave once my questions have been answered," Han Li said with a reassuring smile. Sect leader Yang Shan raised an eyebrow upon hearing this, then closed his eyes in a stoic manner. "Does this mean you're refusing to cooperate?" Han Li asked. "That's right. I don't know who you are, but you're not getting any information about our patriarch from me. If you wish to kill me, then do as you please," sect leader Yang Shan declared. "I appreciate loyal people like you, but my questions are very important and must be answered, so I'm afraid that I'll have to subject you to a bit of suffering," Han Li said, and he wasn't irked at all by sect leader Yang Shan's refusal to cooperate. "If you want to search my soul, then go ahead. Even if you're a Tao ancestor, you won't be able to bypass the 9-dragon seal that our patriarch planted in my soul," sect leader Yang Shan sneered. "So that seal was personally placed upon you by Feng Qingshui. It would indeed be able to prevent the majority of Tao ancestors from searching your soul, but unfortunately for you, that doesn't apply to me," Han Li said with a faint smile. A derisive sneer appeared on sect leader Yang Shan's face upon hearing this, and it was clear that he was of the opinion that Han Li was merely bluffing. "This 9-dragon seal is closely connected to your soul, and it contains 9 different types of power. As soon as it's infiltrated by any external power, it'll immediately detonate. How troublesome," Han Li mused with a faint smile. Sect leader Yang Shan closed his eyes once again, as a cold sneer appeared on his face. "However, this 9-dragon seal is supported by the power of your soul, so if your soul is weakened, then the seal will also become weaker. If your soul is reduced to the golden immortal stage, then even if this seal is to explode, I'll be able to easily suppress the explosion," Han Li continued. Sect leader Yang Shan's eyes instantly sprang open upon hearing this, and a look of unease appeared on his face. Before he had a chance to do anything, Han Li raised a hand before spreading his fingers apart, and 5 bursts of golden light shot out of his fingertips. One was as explosive as fire, one was as gentle as water, one was as dense as earth, one was as exuberant as wood, and the final one was as sharp as metal. Each burst of golden light was giving off a completely different type of time law powers, and the 5 bursts of golden light descended around sect leader Yang Shan, then intertwined with one another to form a golden light barrier. The 5 bursts of time law powers came together in a seamless manner, and the nearby spirit domain began to flash with golden light. The flow of time around sect leader Yang Shan was undergoing a drastic change, and he let loose a pained cry as his aura began to rapidly decline. In the blink of an eye, he had been reduced from the peak great encompassment stage to the golden immortal stage, and this was no illusion. His law powers, number of immortal acupoints and soul power had all dropped to the golden immortal stage, which meant that he would have to begin cultivating anew from the golden immortal stage if he wanted to return to his former cultivation base. "What did you do to me?" Sect leader Yang Shan yelled frantically as he hurriedly attempted to detonate his own soul, but Han Li was able to easily subdue him. At his current cultivation base, it had become far easier for Han Li to channel his 5-elemental illusory world ability, and now that sect leader Yang Shan's soul power had fallen to the golden immortal stage, the 9-dragon seal was powerless to stop Han Li from searching his soul. With the 9-dragon seal easily bypassed, sect leader Yang Shan's memories were all laid bare to Han Li. "So he's in the Mist Dragon secret area. You should have just told me that and spared yourself all this suffering," Han Li sneered as he withdrew his hand, and sect leader Yang Shan immediately fell unconscious. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of golden light, which swept over sect leader Yang Shan, and he instantly vanished from the spot, following which Han Li also departed. Ali. Inside a valley deep within the Mist Dragon sect, 3 streaks of light descended from the heavens, and they were none other than the 3 great encompassment cultivators from before. At the end of the valley was an ordinary-looking stone door, and the 3 of them fell to their knees outside, following which Elder Jai pulled out a stick of incense before lighting it. A plume of blue smoke came wafting out of the lit stick of incense, then slowly seeped through the stone door. Beyond the stone door was a vast, bottomless sea, hanging over which was a radiant blue sun. All of a sudden, a layer of blue mist rose up over the surface of the sea, as if the water were being evaporated by the sunlight. Occasionally, a huge wave would sweep over the surface, revealing a giant tail or a massive claw. On the seabed was a massive cave that was filled with countless strange rocks, forming a vast stone forest. Laying within the stone forest were countless massive skeletons ranging from thousands of feet to over 100,000 feet in size, and even though they were only sets of remains, they were still giving off an incredibly arrogant aura, as if they were looking down on all of the living beings under the heavens. These were all dragon skeletons, so it seemed that this place was a tomb for dragons. Seated on a large, blue rock in the cave was none other than Feng Qingshui, and he was staring off into space, seemingly contemplating something. Some time later, he reached out with one hand to make a grabbing motion, and a vortex of blue mist quickly took shape in front of him. "What's brought all three of you here to see me at once?" Feng Qingshui asked. The voice of Elder Jai rang out from within the blue vortex, explaining, "Sorry to interrupt your seclusion, esteemed patriarch, but sect leader Yang Shan seems to have been abducted by someone we strongly suspect to be a Dao ancestor." "Oh, how did it happen? Give me more details," Feng Qingshui instructed. Elder Jai duly obliged, giving Feng Qingshui a detailed recount of events. If they were able to abduct Yang Shan in such a short time, even after he activated the four seas crashing waves formation, then they most likely were indeed a Dao ancestor, Feng Qingshui mused. What was even more concerning to him was that he had completely failed to detect anything. While it was true that he was in the Mist Dragon secret area, and his mind had been on other things just now, surely he should have still been able to sense the presence of a hostile Dao ancestor in his sect. After a brief silence, Feng Qingshui said, "All right, I'll look into the matter." Before he had a chance to finish, a booming voice suddenly rang out to cut him off. "There's no need to look into anything. I have your sect leader right here." At the same time, the entire secret area suddenly began to tremble violently, and a thick pillar of golden light descended from the heavens to pulverize the vortex of blue mist in front of Feng Qingshui, thereby cutting off communication between him and the three elders outside. An alarmed look appeared on Feng Qingshui's face as he sprang back in retreat, and at the same time, plumes of white mist surged out of his body, instantly giving him an indistinct and illusory appearance. The pillar of golden light faded to reveal none other than Han Li, and Feng Qingshui was struck by a sense of familiarity at the sight of the intruder. At his cultivation base, seeing through disguises was a simple feat, and he could tell that the intruder was not concealing his true appearance. Han Li paid no heed to Feng Qingshui as he released his spiritual sense to encompass the entirety of the Mist Dragon sect area. Swimming within the boundless sea in the secret area were countless dragons of extremely pure bloodlines, and there were close to 20 great encompassment stage dragons among them, while the cave was littered with countless dragon skeletons. However, Han Li had no interest in these dragons as he was searching for something else, and judging from the look that had appeared on his face, his search had clearly proved to be a fruitless one. "It's you!" Feng Qingshui suddenly exclaimed as a look of recognition appeared in his eyes. He had finally recalled that Han Li had been one of the intruders that had snuck into Usura City, while he had been in the Grey Realm, attempting to recruit Yin Chengquan as an ally. However, he recalled that at the time, Han Li had only been at the peak golden immortal stage, so the fact that he had managed to reach the peak great encompassment stage in such a short time since then was nothing short of astonishing. Could it be that he concealed his true power back then? That's a very strong possibility. I recall he and a devilish companion of his had vanished under very mysterious circumstances back then. I had thought at the time that they had been saved by some powerful ally of theirs, but perhaps it was him all along, Feng Qingshui thought to himself. "Were you the one who captured Wanner?" Han Li asked as he cast a cold gaze toward Feng Qingshui. "I don't know who you're referring to. Why have you captured the leader of my sect?" Feng Qingshui countered. Don't try to play dumb with me, Hanli sneered as he conjured up a ball of golden light, contained within which was the visage of Nangong Wan. A faint smile appeared on Feng Qingshui's face, but he offered no response. Hand her over right now and I'll release your sect leader and leave. Otherwise, I'm going to have to get a little rough with you, Hanli harumphed coldly. I can't even recall how many years it's been since someone has dared to speak to me like this. I can tell you that I was indeed the one who captured that woman, but it was under the orders of the heavenly court, and she has already been sent there, Feng Qingshui declared. Han Li was already mentally prepared for this outcome, but his face still paled slightly upon hearing this. Why does the heavenly court want to capture her? Han Li asked in a cold voice. I don't know, I was only following orders, and the heavenly court didn't feel the need to tell me their reasons, Feng Qingshui replied. In that case, it's time for you to pay for what you've done, Han Li declared in a cold voice as his robes began flapping audibly around him, despite the lack of wind. A burst of dazzling, golden light erupted out of his body alongside tremendous time law powers, and an astonished look appeared on Feng Qingshui's face as he exclaimed, "You're a cultivator of time law powers." At the same time, he sprang back in retreat while sweeping both sleeves through the air, and countless strands of blue light appeared out of thin air before sweeping toward Han Li like a blue sea. A cold sneer appeared on Han Li's face as he transformed into a streak of golden light that raced through the air at an incredible speed, leaving a trail of afterimages in its wake. Immediately thereafter, Han Li appeared behind Feng Qingshui without any warning, and all of the strands of blue light in the air had already been severed, while Feng Qingshui's body had been split into two from head to toe by a line that ran down the center. However, even as his body split into two, not a single drop of blood appeared, and all of a sudden, the two halves of his body exploded into two clouds of blue mist that darted away into the distance before fusing back together to reform him. In the wake of the ordeal that he had just suffered, he was looking a little pale, but he quickly recovered, and he exclaimed, "Those time law powers! There's no mistaking it, you must be a disciple of the true mantra sect. You're a smart man, but people who are too smart tend to not live very long." Han Li harumphed coldly as his spirit domain erupted out of his body. Within the spirit domain, Han Li's mantra-treasured axis emerged before transforming into a bright, golden moon that began rapidly revolving while releasing countless golden ripples. As soon as these golden ripples swept over Feng Qingshui's body, he was instantly immobilized, resembling a snapshot in time. Han Li pounced on this opportunity to throw an almighty punch, and 5 bursts of time law powers erupted out of his fist before combining as one. However, instead of forming his 5-elemental illusory world, the 5 bursts of time law powers came together to form a golden fist that struck Feng Qingshui with the force of a hurtling asteroid. The 5 bursts of time law powers within the golden fist clashed violently against one another, but didn't completely explode, and they were giving off terrifying power that seemed capable of destroying anything in its path. This was an ability that Han Li had created, and he had named it Great 5 Elemental Annihilation Fist. A loud thump rang out as Feng Qingshui's body exploded into countless scraps of blood and flesh. And on top of that, a giant, golden sun that was millions of kilometers in diameter appeared around him, with bursts of fearsome time law powers raging within it. All space, matter, and even time within the golden sun was reduced to nothingness, and the scraps of Feng Qingshui's body were naturally no exception. At the same time, astonishingly destructive shockwaves swept through the air in all directions, and huge cracks appeared all over the Mist Dragon's secret area before it collapsed violently. The space above the Mist Dragon sect was pulverized as a boundless sea appeared out of thin air, encompassing the entire sect and close to half of the Sky Sea continent. The bright, blue sun in the secret area had also appeared, and it continued to give off rays of blue radiance, while all of the dragons in the sea were trembling and cowering in fear. These dragons were extremely proud and looked down on all other living beings, but they still harbored nothing but awe and veneration toward Tao ancestors. The entire continent was about to be inundated by the vast sea crashing down from above, and all of the disciples of the Mist Dragon sect erupted into a blind panic. Elder Jai and his two companions were also looking up at the sky with stunned expressions, and the three of them hurriedly flew up into the air before collectively conjuring up a blue light barrier to oppose the falling seawater. Meanwhile, all of the residents of the Sky Sea continent could only pray that they would somehow survive this cataclysmic disaster. Han Li had also appeared in the sky above the Mist Dragon sect, and his brows furrowed slightly at the sight of the terrible fate that was about to befall the continent down below. He raised a hand to the heavens, and the entire Dragon Abyss Immortal region was instantly filled by boundless blue light, while all of the seawater and water attribute spiritual chi in the air fell completely still. The vast sea that had gushed out of the Mist Dragon secret area was also suspended in midair as a gargantuan ball of water, which then raced toward the sea at Han Li's behest. The three great encompassment stage Mist Dragon sect elders were unable to get away in time before the unfathomably massive ball of water crashed into them, and blood came gushing out of their mouths as they were swept away into the distance. The ball of water flew out of the Sky Sea continent in the blink of an eye, where it was then released into the sea by Han Li, and with that, the crisis had been averted. The ball of water crashed down into the sea below with an almighty splash, and countless, enormous waves were sent sweeping over the surface of the sea in all directions. All of the dragons in the ball of water hurriedly fled in all directions, forced to swallow their pride as they frantically swam for their lives. All the while, Han Li remained hovering high up in the sky with a contemplative look on his face. While he was extremely confident in his own powers, it didn't make sense for a Tao ancestor like Feng Qingshui to have met his demise so easily. As the long-established water Tao ancestor, he stood at the very pinnacle of the entire true immortal realm, yet the Feng Qingshui that had been slain just now really had been a body of flesh and blood, rather than any illusion or avatar. Unwilling to take any chances, Han Li released his unfathomable spiritual sense, and right at this moment, a cacophony of rumbling thunderclaps rang out as a section of the golden lightning net that had previously vanished into thin air around the Sky Sea continent reappeared. Han Li immediately turned to that direction, then vanished from the spot amid a flash of lightning. At the same time, countless balls of golden lightning and lighting sword projections erupted out of the lighting net, and every single one of them was imbued with unfathomable lightning law powers. A deafening boom rang out as all of the space within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers was completely annihilated, and Feng Qingshui was sent flying out of thin air in an unsteady manner. At the moment, his complexion was very pale, and his aura had also receded significantly. In the next instant, Han Li appeared before him as he harumphed coldly. "So you really did use an avatar. You did manage to fool me, but the entire continent has already been surrounded, so you're not going anywhere today." As soon as his voice trailed off, an enormous, golden spirit domain erupted out of his body, and this one was far more powerful than the one that he had conjured up earlier, warping all of the space encompassed within it. Han Li made a hand seal, and a series of giant, golden gates appeared above the spirit domain, leading to various other immortal regions and even many lower realms. Beyond the largest of the golden gates was a boundless space that was filled with golden light, and it contained the power of the laws of time within the heavenly Tao. All of the golden gates lit up at his behest, and bursts of time, law powers funneled their way through them, before fusing into the surrounding time spirit domain. The time in those immortal regions and lower realms was instantly thrown into a state of disarray, while the world's origin chi within them also began churning violently in a doomsday-like scene. All of the time law powers within the Dragon Abyss Immortal region were also converging toward the Golden Spirit domain, altering the complexion of the entire Immortal region drastically. The gate that was connected to the heavenly Tao also lit up as a thick pillar of golden light descended from it before fusing into the spirit domain, and it instantly swelled to several times its original size, while the golden light radiating from it became so bright that it completely outshone the light of the sun. A stunned look appeared on Feng Qingshui's face upon seeing this, and he let loose a loud roar as a blue spirit domain erupted out his body as well. The spirit domain was filled with blue mist that refracted the light in countless different angles, presenting a captivating yet confounding sight to behold. A series of spatial gates also appeared within the blue spirit domain, as it attempted to draw upon power from other immortal regions and realms. But right at this moment, a gargantuan, golden lightning net emerged over the sky-sea continent. All of the space on the other side of the lightning net seemed to have been cut off, and as a result, the spatial gates within Feng Qingshui's water spirit domain were filled entirely with golden lightning. An alarmed look appeared on Feng Qingshui's face upon seeing this, but before he had a chance to do anything, a burst of almighty power came crashing down upon him from Han Li's time spirit domain. The constrictive force was so potent that Feng Qingshui was almost completely immobilized, and he let loose a loud roar as he threw a punch with great difficulty. His blue spirit domain began to rumble as it drew upon some power from the sea down below to help it oppose Han Li's time spirit domain. In the next instant, the two spirit domains clashed with an almighty boom, and this was the most formidable clash that had taken place between the two of them thus far. This was not just a clash between laws, but also a battle between great Taos. However, as one of the three paramount laws, the laws of time were a fundamental part of the heavenly Tao, one that the laws of water couldn't hope to oppose. The entire Dragon Abyss Immortal region had begun trembling violently, and the sky and the sea were collapsing in a cataclysmic fashion. Several enormous spatial rifts had appeared in the center of the immortal region, and they were rapidly widening and elongating, threatening to tear the entire immortal region into pieces. The seawater in the Dragon Abyss Immortal region gushed into the spatial rifts, and some of the smaller fragments of the immortal region on the edges of the spatial rifts were sucked in before plummeting toward the lower realms. Thankfully, the vast majority of the immortal region was comprised of ocean, so even in the face of such a calamitous disaster, there weren't too many casualties. Before long, a series of massive cracks appeared over the surface of the blue spirit domain, and it was shattered into pieces by the might of Han Li's time spirit domain. Feng Qingshui shuddered violently, and his aura was significantly weakened with the destruction of his spirit domain. However, he clearly wasn't going to simply resign himself to his fate, and his shattered spirit domain was still resisting against Han Li's time spirit domain. But as time passed, it was clear that the gold was overwhelming the blue. Finally, as the last bits of blue were devoured, Feng Qingshui threw up a large mouthful of blood as he plummeted out of the sky like a meteorite. Meanwhile, Han Li was also looking a little pale. After all, maintaining a spirit domain of this caliber for such a long time as a peak great encompassment cultivator was quite a strenuous task. However, this was a battle that he had to win, and he couldn't afford to ease up the pressure even for a moment. As Feng Qingshui came falling out of the sky, he threw an almighty punch in his direction, and 5 bursts of bright, golden light shot out of his spirit domain, then intertwined to form another great 5 elemental annihilation fist. The Golden Fist raced toward Feng Qingshui with unmatched speed and power, and in response, Feng Qingshui hurriedly expelled a mouthful of blood essence before casting a rapid string of incantation seals into it. A streak of radiant, blue light shot out from within, and it was none other than the blue sun from the Mist Dragon's secret area, currently in the form of a blue halberd that was around 1,000 feet in size. The halberd was giving off incredibly fearsome law powers that were around twice as formidable as Feng Qingshui's own law powers, and it was clear that this was his trump card. That's a second-tier, immortal treasure. The blue halberd hurtled through the air as a streak of dazzling, blue light at Feng Qingshui's behest, and it pierced its way into the giant, golden fist, shattering it into countless specks of golden light. The blue halberd sped through the specks of golden light, leaving a blue trail in its wake as it hurtled directly toward Han Li with astonishing speed. You were a fool to think that a mere great encompassment cultivator like yourself could challenge a Tao ancestor, Feng Qingshui declared as a hint of insanity flashed through his eyes. Han Li remained completely unfazed by the oncoming blue halberd, and a sense of foreboding welled up in Feng Qingshui's heart at the sight of his composed reaction. Right as the halberd was no more than 1,000 feet away from Han Li, his time-spirit domain abruptly shuddered, and the blue halberd was stopped cold in its tracks. Immediately thereafter, a layer of golden light appeared over its surface, and it exploded into countless pieces right before Feng Qingshui's astonished eyes. A horrified look appeared on his face upon seeing this, and he frantically pulled out a blue tablet before crushing it in his hand. At the same time, he drew up all of his remaining power, and a vast expanse of misty, blue light began to proliferate outward from his body. In the blink of an eye, he had conjured up hundreds of identical avatars to himself, all of which fled in different directions at an incredible speed. A cold sneer appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and countless arcs of golden lightning erupted out of the lightning net around the Sky-Sea continent at his behest. The arcs of lightning converged toward the fleeing avatars from all directions at an even more astonishing speed, and in the blink of an eye, all of the avatars were destroyed, leaving only Feng Qingshui left. Countless arcs of golden lightning had converged around him as well to form a lightning cocoon, and he was completely immobilized as his entire body spasmed uncontrollably. Let this serve as a warning to Gu Huijin. If he doesn't release my Tao partner, the heavenly court will meet the same fate that will befall you now, Han Li declared as he unleashed yet another great 5-elemental annihilation fist, this one even more massive than the previous two, and it sped toward Feng Qingshui with unfathomable destructive might. Right at this moment, the entire Dragon Abyss Immortal region suddenly began to tremble violently, and a burst of tremendous power came crashing down upon the golden lightning net from the outside. This burst of power was 10 times more formidable than what Feng Qingshui was able to muster, and the lightning net immediately began to twist and warp. Following, a huge gash was torn into its surface. At the same time, a turbulent vortex appeared on the surface of the sea below Feng Qingshui, and he was sucked into it along with the lightning cocoon around him. As a result, Han Li's great 5-elemental annihilation fist struck nothing but thin air, while Feng Qingshui was engulfed into the sea. An earth-shattering boom rang out as a golden sun that was millions of kilometers in size emerged, decimating everything within it. But Han Li paid no heed to it as he cast a grim gaze out of the lightning net. All of a sudden, the burst of fearsome power had vanished, as if it had gone into hiding, and Feng Qingshui's aura was also nowhere to be detected. Han Li harumphed coldly as he made a rapid string of hand seals, and the golden lightning net instantly reverted back into 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords that raced away in different directions. As a set of third-tier immortal treasures, The azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were extraordinarily fast, and they instantly flew to all corners of the immortal region, following which arcs of golden lightning began to fan out from them, as if they were searching for something. In the next instant, Han Li's eyes suddenly lit up as he vanished from the spot amid a flash of golden lightning, then instantly reappeared beside an azure bamboo cloud swarm sword that was hovering above a sea on the edge of the Dragon Abyss Immortal region. This was one of the new abilities attained by his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords upon their evolution into third-tier immortal treasures. Regardless of where they were, Han Li would be able to instantly teleport to whichever azure bamboo cloud swarm sword that he pleased through their spiritual connection. From there, he released his spiritual sense, and at the same time, his time-spirit domain erupted out of his body before pouncing down on the sea below like a giant, golden beast. The seawater down below instantly evaporated, revealing Feng Qingshui enveloped in a ball of blue light on the seabed. Caught within Han Li's spirit domain, the ball of blue light had been stopped cold in its tracks. Right at this moment, the same burst of fearsome power from before reappeared, and an incredibly pure blue spirit domain flew out of the nearby sea to encompass Feng Qingshui. The spirit domain was filled with all types of water-based entities, such as rivers, clouds, glaciers, and ripples, and it was as if were the origin of all water under the heavens. The spirit domain clashed violently with Han Li's time-spirit domain, and Han Li felt as if his spirit domain had crashed into a soft, yet extremely resilient wall. A deep indentation had appeared on the blue spirit domain, but it refused to shatter. It was as if all of the unfathomable power in Han Li's time-spirit domain had plunged into a bottomless sea, and it was completely nullified. However, the blue spirit domain was clearly struggling immensely as well, and it looked as if it were on the verge of being overwhelmed. "Who's there?" Han Li yelled as he conjured up the golden spatial gates within his time-spirit domain once again, preparing to draw upon the power of other realms and immortal regions to crush the opposing spirit domain. This spirit domain was far more powerful than Feng Qingshui's, but Han Li was confident that he would be able to crush it. Right at this moment, a voice rang out from within the blue spirit domain. "Hold on a second, fellow Taoist Han. I am not your enemy. I've come here to return fellow Taoist Nangong Wan to you." As soon as the voice trailed off, a ball of blue light shot out from within the blue spirit domain, and it contained none other than Nangong Wan. "Wanner!" Han Li yelled in an ecstatic manner as he hurriedly swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of golden light to catch her. Through the power of his spirit domain, Han Li was able to verify that this was truly Nangong Wan and not some trick. However, she was currently in an unconscious state, and it seemed as if her soul had been sealed away. Han Li rested a fingertip against her glabella, injecting a burst of soul power into her consciousness. In doing so, he discovered that the seal in her consciousness was a very unremarkable one that he could break with ease, but he didn't dare to do so with these two formidable adversaries before him. With another sweep of his sleeve, he sent Nangong Wan into the flower branch domain, then withdrew his spirit domain until it had shrunk down to only several dozen kilometers in size, but didn't withdraw it entirely. The opposing, blue spirit domain also shrank down significantly before retreating to a safe distance away, and Han Li made no effort to pursue it. "You must be Han Li, right? I can see that you've fully harnessed the inheritance of the true mantra sect. Congratulations." A delicate young woman with a head of blue hair emerged from the blue spirit domain. She had a pair of sparkling eyes, a delicate nose, a pair of small cherry lips, and her blue hair was arranged into many little braids, giving her the appearance of a mischievous young girl. She was wearing a blue dress that left her arms and calves exposed, and there were no shoes on her feet, There was an intricate blue band around each of her ankles and wrists, hanging from which were some tiny bells that produced a tinkling chime with her movements. However, her most eye-catching trait was the pair of delicate dragon horns on her forehead, as well as the faint, true spirit bloodline aura swirling around her. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. Even though he was on the Heavenly Court's wanted list, his cultivation base had been too lowly to attract the attention of the Tao ancestors, and that was why Feng Qingshui had failed to recognize him. However, this woman, who was clearly a more powerful Tao ancestor than Feng Qingshui, was somehow aware of exactly who he was. "Who are you?" Han Li asked in a wary manner. At the same time, he made a beckoning motion, and all of his azure bamboo cloud-swarm swords scattered throughout the Dragon Abyss Immortal region immediately returned to him before flying up his sleeve. "My name is Chen Ruyan, and I am the essential water Tao ancestor. You can call me Ruyan," the young woman replied with a wide grin. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly upon hearing this. Chen Ruyan's lips puckered slightly as she put on a pitiable display and continued. "I only captured your Tao partner under the orders of the Heavenly Court, and I've already returned her to you, so surely there's no need to look at me with so much animosity." "You serve the Heavenly Court as well?" Han Li asked. "I haven't joined the Heavenly Court, but I occasionally do things for them, even though I may not necessarily like it. Gu Huijin is too powerful for me to oppose, so I have no choice but to conform," Chen Ruyan replied. "Didn't Feng Qingshui say that Wanner had already been sent to the Heavenly Court? Why was she with you?" Han Li asked. Chen Ruyan merely smiled and offered no response. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and right at this moment, Feng Qingshui suddenly flew out of her blue spirit domain. All of his injuries had been healed, and his aura had also recovered significantly. "Please accept my sincerest apologies for my incompetence, Mistress Ruyan," Feng Qingshui said with a guilty expression, and Han Li wasn't surprised to see this display of subordination from him. Chen Ruyan was the essential water Tao ancestor, while Feng Qingshui was the water Tao ancestor, so the latter was naturally bound to be below the former on the pecking order. This type of relationship was not rare among Tao ancestors, and almost every essential Tao ancestor had a corresponding, subordinate Tao ancestor. "It's fine. Even I wouldn't be able to defeat fellow Taoist Han in battle, so there's no need to feel so bad about your defeat," Chen Ruyan said in an indifferent manner, displaying a completely different attitude than when speaking to Han Li. Feng Qingshui nodded in response as he took a glum glance at Han Li. "While it's true that Feng Qingshui was the one who captured your Tao partner, he was only acting under the orders of the Heavenly Court, so please let him off the hook now that fellow Taoist Nangong has been returned to you. Feng Qingshui and I occasionally do some favors for the Heavenly Court, but we are not Gu Huijin's allies, and we have no intention of opposing the Reincarnation Palace," Chen Ruyan said. A look of realization flashed through Han Li's eyes upon hearing this. These two captured Wanner at Gu Huijin's behest, but now that the Reincarnation Palace has made its move against the Heavenly Court, they're unsure of which side will come out on top, so they decided to keep Wanner and wait for the situation unfold before making a decision. Feng Qingshui most likely lied about having already sent Wanner to the Heavenly Court in order to intentionally goad me into a rage so that I would display my full power. Now that they've witnessed my power, they're even more unwilling to oppose the Reincarnation Palace, and that's why they've returned Wanner to me. With that in mind, Han Li cast his gaze toward Feng Qingshui as he said, "In that case, I'll spare you this time, but you won't be so fortunate if you dare to go after anyone close to me again." After that, he promptly withdrew his time spirit domain, before vanishing from the spot amid a flash of golden lightning. The Reincarnation Palace really has managed to recruit a very powerful ally. The outcome of the conflict between the Reincarnation Palace and the Heavenly Court is only becoming more and more difficult to predict, Chen Ruyan mused with a faint smile. Mistress Ruyan, how are we going to answer to Gu Huajin now that you've returned Nangong Wan to Han Li? Feng Qingshui asked with a concerned expression. It's fine. Just say that you were about to send her to the Heavenly Court when cultivators from the Reincarnation Palace intervened and rescued her. Right now, the Heavenly Court is facing a full frontal assault from the Reincarnation Palace, so they won't dare to do anything to us, Chen Ruyan replied. The concern on Feng Qingshui's face eased slightly upon hearing this, but he then began in a hesitant manner. By the way, about that Han Li. If you have something to say, then spit it out, Chen Ruyan said. I met him once in the Gray Realm around 2,000 years ago, and since then, I've been notified that one of his companions at the time is a prince of the Devil Realm, so I suspect that he may have some ties with the Devil Realm, Feng Qingshui said. Oh, tell me what happened, Chen Ruyan instructed as she raised an eyebrow, and Feng Qingshui promptly delivered a detailed recount of everything that took place in the Gray Realm at the time. After hearing his story, Chen Ruyan's eyes narrowed slightly as she mused. There's no way he could have gone from the peak golden immortal stage to the peak great encompassment stage in just 2,000 years, so he must have hidden his true power back then. As for how they were teleported out of the Gray Realm, perhaps he wasn't the one to do it, but it definitely would have had something to do with him. That really complicates things. Could it be that the Reincarnation Palace is colluding with the Devil Realm? Also, did the Reincarnation Palace orchestrate Liu Qi's escape from the Gray Realm as well? Hasn't it already been confirmed that ties exist between the Devil Realm and the Reincarnation Palace? The ability of the Reincarnation Palace masks to teleport items from wearer to wearer indicates a very advanced incorporation of spatial law powers, and only the cultivators of the Devil Realm could be so proficient in manipulating spatial laws, Feng Qingshui said. However, Chen Ruyan shook her head as she said, there are other details involved that you're not aware of. Feng Qingshui was rather intrigued to hear this, but he could tell from Chen Ruyan's expression that she didn't want him asking questions. If Liu Qi was also rescued by the Reincarnation Palace, then there's a chance that the primordial land has also forged an alliance with the Reincarnation Palace. They really are everywhere, Feng Qingshui exclaimed with a stunned expression. How else do you think the Reincarnation Palace was able to oppose the Heavenly Court for so long? Chen Ruyan harumphed, and Feng Qingshui fell into a sheepish silence. It looks like a major tribulation is about to sweep over the true immortal realm. I wonder if we'll be able to safely weather the storm, Chen Ruyan sighed. Aren't you thinking too much, Mistress Ruyan? We are Tao ancestors, so we should be safe as long as we don't get involved in the conflict between the Heavenly Court and the Reincarnation Palace, Feng Qingshui said in a dismissive manner. No one is guaranteed to be safe in the face of an all-encompassing tribulation. In fact, you would have most likely already perished by now had I not intervened, Chen Ruyan said, and Feng Qingshui lowered his head upon hearing this. In any case, there's no point in thinking excessively about such matters. We'll just have to take things one step at a time, Chen Ruyan said, then vanished from the spot. Feng Qingshui remained where he was for a moment, then flew back to the Mist Dragon sect as a streak of blue light. The shattered space in the Dragon Abyss Immortal region had already returned to normal, and the unrest in the world's origin chi had also subsided. Meanwhile, Han Li appeared in the air above a small and secluded island amid a flash of golden lightning. He briefly examined the surrounding area with his spiritual sense to ensure that there wasn't anything amiss, then set up several layers of restrictions over the entire island. From the outside, it appeared as if the island had vanished into thin air. After that, he consumed a pair of blue pills. then pulled out two high-grade immortal origin stones to assist in the recovery of his immortal spiritual power. He had obtained the blue pills from Shui Changshan's storage tool, and they were a type of recovery pill that were quite potent even for late great encompassment cultivators. And coupled with the two high-grade immortal origin stones, it wasn't long before he had recovered close to half of his energy reserves. As opposed to continuing to rest and recuperate, he immediately rose to his feet before entering the flower branch domain, where Nangong Wan was hovering in midair in a peaceful slumber. Laying on the ground not far away was sect leader Yang Shan, who Han Li had tossed into the flower branch domain after the soul search. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of golden light, carefully wiping away the residual effects of the time law powers in his body, then cast him out of the flower branch domain, but only after he had confiscated all of his storage tools. He had originally planned to use sect leader Yang Shan as leverage in exchange for some information about Nangong Wan's whereabouts, but now that she had been returned to him, there was no point in keeping sect leader Yang Shan. With sect leader Yang Shan out of the way, Han Li carried Nangong Wan into the bamboo pavilion, then carefully set her down onto the bed inside. Looking at her sleeping features, he couldn't help but allow himself a faint smile. He had thought of her on countless occasions since his ascension to the true immortal realm, and even though they had been reunited earlier than this, she had been without her memories, so this was their first true reunion. Han Li took a deep breath to compose himself, then gently pressed a finger against Nangong Wan's glabella, and a series of blue lines instantly emerged beneath his fingertip to form a simple seal. The seal was no match for Han Li's power, and it flickered momentarily before quickly dissipating, following which Nangong Wan's eyelashes fluttered slightly as she opened her eyes. "Wanner," Han Li called out in a gentle voice as he leaned down slightly with a gentle look in his eyes. Nangong Wan was still looking rather dazed, seemingly yet to completely recover. Han Li cast an incantation seal into her glabella upon seeing this, and a cool and refreshing sensation spread through her consciousness, instantly returning her fully to her senses. She sat up on the bed, only to turn to Han Li in an expressionless manner. Han Li's heart sank slightly upon seeing this. Could it be that he had been deceived, and Nangong Wan hadn't actually recovered her memories from this lifetime? Despite his concerns, he reached out for her hand as he asked, "What's wrong, Wanner? It's me." Nangong Wan pulled back her hand so that it was out of Han Li's reach, then flew out of the bed with a wary look on her face. "Who are you?" "I am your Dao partner, Han Li replied. "How can you prove your identity to me?" Nangong Wan asked in a cold manner. A sense of relief welled up in Han Li's heart upon hearing this. It seemed that Nangong Wan had recovered her memories. She simply had reservations about his identity. "Do you still remember the first time we met, Wanner? It was during the trial of blood and fire. At the time, you concealed yourself among us Qi condensation stage disciples to pick spirit medicines from all over the secret area. I have to say, that wasn't your finest moment," Han Li chuckled. 1. A reminiscent look flashed through Nangong Wan's eyes upon hearing this, but it was only there for a moment before reverting back to the same apprehensive expression from before. "After that, we worked together to defeat that flood dragon from what had seemed like a dire situation, and that was the beginning of our entwined fates." Han Li began to tell their story from the beginning, and even though countless years had passed since those events, they still remained fresh in his memory, as if they had taken place just yesterday. "We were separated after I ascended to the true immortal realm, and I had thought that perhaps that would have been a permanent separation, but fate has brought us back together," Han Li concluded. Nangong Wan listened in silence the entire time, and it was clear from her expression that she wasn't swayed. "These are all of our past experiences together, Wanner. I'm sure no one else aside from the two of us is privy to this information, Han Li said with a hopeful look in his eyes. That doesn't prove anything. I can't tell what your current cultivation base is, but it's definitely above my own, so you could have easily searched my soul if you wanted to, Nangong Wan objected. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, then sighed. I suppose you're right. In that case, how would you like me to prove my identity to you? A contemplative look appeared on Nangong Wan's face as she considered the question. All of a sudden, Han Li's expression changed slightly as he noticed that she was only giving off a true, immortal stage aura. He had been so caught up in the joy of their reunion that he had failed to notice this. It seemed that with her memories recovered, the cultivation base that had belonged to Gan Rushwang and been bestowed upon her by the Six Paths reincarnation plate had been lost. I can see that your cultivation base has been regressed to the true immortal stage by the Six Paths reincarnation plate, but I've examined your condition, and this regression won't affect your future cultivation, Han Li assured. The Six Paths reincarnation plate. That's that underworld treasure in the reincarnation palace master's possession, right? Do you know of that man's daughter? Nangong Wan asked. I do. Her name is Gan Jiazhen, and she was your daughter in your past life. If you have any other questions, then feel free to raise them, Han Li replied with a calm nod. How does that work? Also, why does the reincarnation palace master look exactly like you? Nangong Wan asked. Han Li heaved a faint, internal sigh, then told Nangong Wan about his ties with the reincarnation palace master, as well as how the latter had attempted to reawaken her memories of her past life using the Six Paths reincarnation plate. Nangong Wan took some time to process this new information, then asked him a few more questions about the underworld, all of which he was able to answer. Surely you believe me now, Han Li said. That still doesn't prove it, Nangong Wan replied with a stubborn shake of her head. A resigned look appeared on Han Li's face, but an idea then occurred to him. With a sweep of his sleeve, he summoned his 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, and the lightning flashing over them faded away to reveal the swords underneath. These azure bamboo cloud swarm swords have always been my bonded treasure, even from back when we were together. I've refined them many times over the years, but the natural aura of the golden lightning bamboo has been retained, Han Li said. Nangong Wan stared blankly at the azure bamboo cloud swarm swords for a moment before turning her gaze back to Han Li, and her expressionless facade was finally beginning to crack. Oh, and there's also this. I've refined this treasure on multiple occasions as well, but it still retains some of its old traits, Han Li said as he summoned his integrated 5 extremes mountain. Nangong Wan shuddered slightly at the sight of the mountain, and her resolve was clearly wavering as she turned back to Han Li. I've discarded all of my other treasures that you would be familiar with over the years, but I can still display some cultivation arts and abilities that you would have seen in the past, such as my holy nirvana physique and... Before he had a chance to finish, Nangong Wan had already dove into his arms, and she was embracing him with all her might as she murmured, "It's enough, I believe you." After recovering her memories in the underworld, Nangong Wan had suffered a steep decline in her cultivation base, and everyone around her had been countless times more powerful than her, putting her in a constant state of unease. Now that she was finally reunited with Han Li, she finally felt safe again, and she was gripping his arms with all her strength, as if she were afraid that he would disappear if she allowed her grip to relax even for a second. Han Li returned her embrace with an affectionate and sympathetic look in his eyes. He had been furious at the reincarnation palace master's decision to awaken the memories of Nangong Wan's past life, but he had been powerless to oppose him at the time, so he was forced to leave her behind. Now that Nangong Wan was finally back by his side, He felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from his chest. His spiritual sense began to churn within his consciousness with this sudden and drastic change in his mental state, and he hurriedly closed his eyes to calm himself. As he did so, he suddenly noticed that his nascent soul seemed to have undergone a curious change. It wasn't a significant change, and it would have completely escaped his notice had he not just so happened to have been inspecting his own internal condition. It was this slight change that had resulted in an advancement in his cultivation of the spirit refinement technique, and his spiritual sense had been significantly enhanced. With his cultivation of the spirit refinement technique, his spiritual sense had become more and more powerful, but it had never been a single, unified entity in his consciousness. Instead, it was as if it had been split up into individual bursts of power that refused to fuse with one another, resulting in a rather chaotic state. He was able to unify his spiritual sense whenever he drew upon his spirit refinement technique, but as soon as he stopped, his spiritual sense would return to its normal, chaotic state. However, just now, his spiritual sense seemed to have found a point of unification. It felt like a scattered and broken soul that had suddenly found a home, or a nascent soul that had returned to its host body after many years of roaming. It was an indescribably blissful feeling, as if his nascent soul had been made whole, and what was even more of a pleasant surprise was that he had taken a significant stride toward reaching full mastery of the 7th level of the spirit refinement technique. Upon sensing this change in Han Li's emotions, Nangong Wan gently pulled back to look at him as she asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I'm just really happy to have you back," Han Li replied in a gentle voice as he enveloped her in his embrace once again. The two of them held each other in an intimate silence for a long time before releasing one another and exchanging a smile, and it was as if they had gone back in time to the days of old. "I'm sorry for suspecting you just now," Nangong Wan said as an apologetic look appeared on her face. "It's fine, in fact. It's very reassuring to see that you're so careful and cautious," Han Li said with a smile as he stowed his azure bamboo cloudswarm swords and integrated 5 extremes mountain away, then sat down on the edge of the bed with Nangong Wan. "What have you experienced during your time in the true immortal realm? I've heard some things about you from Gan Jiuzhen and the Reincarnation Palace Master, and they've mentioned some feats of yours that seem almost too extraordinary to be true," Nangong Wan said. "I don't have any significant feats to my name. All I've been doing is running away from all types of adversaries over the years," Han Li replied with a wry smile. "I know you like to keep a low profile, but you don't have to be so modest when you're with me," Nangong Wan complained. "Let me ask you this. Where do your powers rank in the true immortal realm right now?" "At the moment, the most powerful cultivator in the entire true immortal realm has to be the Time Dao ancestor, Gu Huijin. As for who's second, I don't think it's any of the other Dao ancestors. Instead, I think it's the Reincarnation Palace Master. As for myself, I should be able to squeeze into the top 10, Han Li replied with a smile. "I knew it. You're still the same dominant force that you were back in the spirit realm. Tell me everything that you've done during your time in the immortal realm and don't try to keep any secrets. Also, I have a gift for you," Nangong Wan said as she pulled out half of a green jade pendant. The jade pendant was as translucent as water, and there was an elegant figure etched onto its surface. The figure was none other than Violet Spirit, while the jade slip that Violet Spirit had given to him had carried a visage of Nangong Wan. "All right, if you want to hear my story, then we'll have to start from the very beginning. After I ascended to the true immortal realm, I ended up in a secluded immortal region called the Northern Glacial Immortal Region." With that, Han Li commenced his tale, detailing his journey through the true immortal realm. He glossed over some parts that contained sensitive information or concerned Violet Spirit, but he was very candid about everything else, even fully revealing the role that the heaven-controlling vial had played in his cultivation, something that he had never revealed to anyone else before. Nangongwan quickly became fully absorbed in his story, and her emotions fluctuated wildly with each twist and turn that was unveiled. Her brows would furrow tightly whenever she heard about the people who had attempted to harm Han Li in the past, and she would heave a long sigh of relief upon learning how Han Li was able to save himself from his predicaments. It was as if Han Li were a war veteran husband who had returned from the battlefield to tell his wife about his glorious feats. As Nangongwan listened to his story, her heart was filled with pride at his achievements, concern at the tribulations that he had been forced to endure, and elation at their long-awaited reunion. Even though Han Li had discarded most of his attachments over the course of his cultivation journey, he retained a pure and earnest heart when it came to Nangongwan, and it was only in her presence that he could truly be himself. After I learned that you had been captured by Feng Qingshui, I immediately traveled to the Dragon Abyss Immortal region, where I battled him and Chen Ruyan. Thankfully, the heavens were on my side, and you were returned safely to me, Han Li recounted, marking a conclusion to his story. I've imagined to myself countless times what you would experience following your ascension, but the reality is far more extraordinary than anything I could have ever envisioned. The average person would have died countless times in your shoes, only you would be able to emerge in triumph from all of those perilous situations, Nangongwan said with a hint of admiration in her voice. It's only thanks to a ridiculous amount of luck that I was able to make it to this point alive and well, Han Li replied with a faint smile. And you also had the help of many powerful and beautiful women, didn't you? I've heard from Gan Jiuzhen that Weeping Soul and Jin Tong have already transformed into a pair of stunning beauties, and that's not even to mention Violet Spirit, Nangongwan said with an amused smile. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face as he said, "Please don't make jokes at my expense. You know Weeping Soul, she's been with me ever since she was a little monkey back in the mortal realm. Speaking of Jin Tong, I never imagined that she would have such an extraordinary origin story. As for Violet Spirit," a slightly awkward look had appeared on his face at the mention of Violet Spirit, but before he had a chance to explain, Nangongwan pinched his lips between her fingers to cut him off. "I'm not going to get jealous over something like this. All of these things are preordained by fate, just like our meeting," Nangongwan said in a gentle voice. Han Li nodded in response, then changed the subject as he said, "That's enough about me. How was life in the spirit realm for you before you ascended?" "My time in the spirit realm was far less eventful than your time in the immortal realm. Following your ascension, I remained in the Azure Origin Palace to cultivate, and thanks to the resources that you left me and some opportunities that I encountered, I was able to reach the Grand Ascension stage. After that, it took me several thousand more years to reach the pinnacle of the Grand Ascension stage, at which point I attempted to transcend my heavenly tribulation so that I could be reunited with you in the true immortal realm," Nangongwan recounted. "How did your heavenly tribulation go?" Han Li asked. "I thought I had prepared sufficiently to transcend my tribulation, but as things turned out, I was clearly too ambitious. In the end, I was overwhelmed, and in my final moments, I yelled to the heavens, hoping that you would be able to hear me," Nangongwan replied with a wry smile. Even though Han Li knew that Nangongwan had clearly gone on to survive the ordeal, he still couldn't help but reach out to stroke her cheek in concern. "I thought I was dead, but I woke up in a dark world, and by then, my magic power had already been converted into immortal spiritual power. On top of that, I was surrounded by true immortals that were all far more powerful than Ma Liang had been," Nangongwan continued. 1. "A dark world, was it the underworld?" Han Li asked. "That's right. The Reincarnation Palace Master saved me, but he sealed away my memories, and my consciousness fell into a deep slumber, only reawakening recently, Nangongwan replied. You must have suffered a lot of hardship over the years without me by your side, Han Li sighed as he latched onto her hand. Why did you leave the Reincarnation Palace in the end? The Reincarnation Palace Master was very respectful to me, and he didn't restrict my freedom either, but my intuition told me that it was best for me to stay away from him. On top of that, I really wanted to see you, so I escaped in secret, but it seems like all I've done is cause you trouble, Nangongwan replied as she lowered her head in a guilty display. Not at all, Han Li said with a smile. I didn't want to leave you at the Reincarnation Palace, but I had no choice at the time. If you hadn't escaped from the underworld, who knows when our reunion would have come. A bright smile appeared on Nangongwan's face upon hearing this, and he latched onto Han Li's hand with both of her own. Speaking of which, how is the human race doing in the spirit realm? And how is everyone in the Azure Origin Palace? Han Li asked. The human race is doing very well, thanks to the foundation that you left behind, and everyone in the Azure Origin Palace had been progressing very smoothly in their cultivation while I was there. At the time of my tribulation transcendence, Qi Lingzi and Hai Yueshan had both reached the pinnacle of the body integration stage, while Bai Guor had reached the grand ascension stage. Two fellow Taoist Ice Phoenix and Sister Silvermoon reached the grand ascension stage even earlier than I did. 3. But they wanted to prepare more extensively for their tribulation transcendences, Nangongwan replied. Han Li was overcome by a wave of nostalgia upon hearing all of these familiar names, and he was very happy to hear that all of them were doing well. However, at the same time, he couldn't help but be struck by a sense of sorrow, not knowing if he would be able to see them ever again. The path of cultivation was one that was inherently fraught with loneliness, and he should already count himself very fortunate that fate had brought Nangongwan back to his side. By the way, how is Yuan Yao doing right now? Han Li asked. 4. A hint of dejection appeared in Nangongwan's eyes at this question. Did something happen to her? Han Li asked as a sense of foreboding welled up in his heart. Sister Yuan Yao was also able to reach the grand ascension stage. She received Senior Qing Yuanzi's inheritance, allowing her to progress rapidly in her cultivation, and she attempted her tribulation transcendence even earlier than I did, but unfortunately, she was unable to make it, Nangongwan replied as she lowered her gaze in a display of sorrow. Han Li was completely blindsided by this news, and a sense of grief welled up in his heart. Don't be saddened by her passing. Sister Yuan Yao and I chatted for an entire night before her tribulation transcendence, and she told me that she had lived a spectacular life, and that she had no regrets regardless of whether she succeeded in her tribulation transcendence or not, Nangongwan said. I'm fine, Wanner, don't worry about me. It's just that I was a little caught off guard by this news, Han Li reassured with a slightly forced smile. I heard from the Reincarnation Palace Master that the Six Paths Reincarnation Plate governs the reincarnation of all living beings. Perhaps we can use it to find Sister Yuan Yao's current incarnation if the opportunity arises, Nangongwan suggested. Yuan Yao perished to the might of the heavenly Tao, so it's unclear whether her soul even survived, and even if we find her current incarnation, it'll no longer be her. Are we supposed to forcibly awaken the memories of her past life like the Reincarnation Palace Master did to you? If we were to do that, we would essentially be killing the Yuan Yao of this lifetime, Han Li said with a shake of his head, and Nangongwan fell silent upon hearing this. If we manage to return to the spirit realm someday, you can take me to visit her grave, Han Li sighed. As a peak great encompassment cultivator, he had become very sensitive to the disparities between realms, and he knew that if he were to enter the spirit realm, it would most likely completely collapse in the face of his power. Nangongwan nodded in response, then suddenly gave Han Li an indignant look as she changed the subject and complained. I can't believe you stumbled upon a treasure as extraordinary as the heaven-controlling vial so early in your cultivation journey. No wonder you progressed so rapidly in your cultivation in the mortal realm and the spirit realm. How could you have kept such a big secret from me for so long? If that secret had been leaked, then I would have had countless people coming after me, so I couldn't tell anyone. If it makes you feel any better, you are the first person that I've revealed the full extent of the heaven-controlling vial's power to, Hanley said with a faint smile. It's fine, I don't blame you for your decision. Given the heaven-controlling vial's extraordinary powers, it's only right that you kept it a secret from everyone. Now that the heavenly court is aware that it's in your possession, won't they send people after you for it? Nangong Wan asked in a concerned manner. That's not a concern. The heavenly court currently has its hands full dealing with the reincarnation palace, and with my current powers, I'm fairly confident in my ability to fend for myself. Outside of 3 people, I should be able to keep the heaven-controlling vial safe from everyone else in the entire true immortal realm, Hanley replied. I have full faith in you, but I'm afraid that I won't be of much help to you, given my current cultivation base, Nangong Wan sighed. An intrigued look then appeared on her face as she mused. It's incredible to think that there exists a treasure capable of space-time transmigration. I can take you on a trip if you're interested, Hanley offered as he pulled out his heaven-controlling vial. Don't do that. Each time you use that ability, it temporarily costs you the power of all of your time Dao runes, and that would leave you in a far too vulnerable state. Nangong Wan immediately refused with a shake of her head. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. Now that he had reached the peak great encompassment stage, he was able to draw upon the power of the heaven-controlling vial to support the heaven-controlling vial's space-time transmigration ability, so the cost of using the ability was nowhere near as steep as before. Having said that, he was very touched that Nangong Wan was so considerate of his safety. All right, we'll leave it for another time then, Han Li said. What are your plans from here? Nangong Wan asked. Truth be told, I was so focused on saving you that I haven't even considered my future plans. However, it's probably best to leave this place, given that my battle against Feng Qingshui and Chen Ruyan has most likely already caught the attention of certain unsavory individuals, Han Li replied, and Nangong Wan naturally raised no objections to this. In an unknown space. The reincarnation palace was standing atop a cliff, and there was an ordinary-looking copper mirror hovering before him. There was an image displayed on the surface of the mirror, and it depicted none other than Han Li and Nangong Wan. There were also 7 or 8 figures standing not far behind him, and they were led by none other than the Heavenmen sect cultivator, Yuan Chunfeng. Right at this moment, Yuan Chunfeng approached the reincarnation palace master with a puzzled expression as he said, I already predicted through my divination that Nangong Wan would sneak out of the underworld to be captured by the heavenly court. So why did you not make an effort to prevent it from happening? Nangong Wan's personality is just like Rushwang's, and now that she has also of Rushwang's memories, she's only become even more willful and stubborn. With her mind already made up, there's no way we could have kept her unless it was by force, the reincarnation palace master replied. Even then, we could have easily intervened before she was captured, Yuan Chunfeng said. I did this to show Han Li that the heavenly court is willing to stoop to anything to get what they want. This time, she was captured because of her ties with me, but in the future, her safety could very likely come under threat due to her ties with him, the reincarnation palace master explained. A confrontation between him and Gu Huijin is inevitable at some point, and given the way Gu Huijin likes to do things, he won't spare anyone close to Han Li, Yuan Chunfeng agreed. Additionally, I also did this to trick the heavenly court. They've searched for me for countless millennia for no avail, and in the wake of Nangong Wan's capture, It seems like I finally panicked and made an irrational decision to come out of hiding," the Reincarnation Palace Master revealed. Even so, that was a little too risky, was it not? If Nangong Wan really had been sent to the heavenly court, then things would have been a lot more troublesome, Yuan Chunfeng said. Feng Qingshui isn't all that bright, but the one above him is very smart. Even your Heavenmen sect knew the importance of hedging your bets. There's no way she would have done something that would have made her a sworn enemy of our Reincarnation Palace, so she would have never allowed Feng Qingshui to send Nangong Wan to the heavenly court, the Reincarnation Palace Master replied. But what if a mishap had occurred during Nangong Wan's capture? Yuan Chunfeng asked. You already saw the outcome of her capture through your divination, so if some mishap had taken place, wouldn't you have been the one to blame? The Reincarnation Palace Master asked. Yuan Chunfeng instantly stiffened upon hearing this, and he felt a chill run down his own spine. The Reincarnation Palace Master allowed the tension to build in the air for a while, then suddenly smiled as he broke the silence and continued. Besides, I was constantly watching from the shadows, so no harm could have befallen her. Of course, Yuan Chunfeng replied with a nod. The Reincarnation Palace Master turned his gaze back to the scene in the mirror. Will this really be enough to convince Han Li to side with us and oppose the heavenly court together? Yuan Chunfeng asked as his gaze also fell upon Han Li. I know him better than anyone else in this world. There are certain things that he absolutely won't make any concessions on, and Nangong Wan is one of them. Now that he's reached the peak great encompassment stage, he's definitely not going to let this matter slide. Right at this moment, his voice abruptly cut off as Han Li suddenly turned to look directly at him through the mirror. In the next instant, the copper mirror abruptly exploded, startling everyone present. What happened? Yuan Chunfeng exclaimed. Don't worry, he simply noticed that he was being spied on. In fact, even the reincarnation mark that I planted on Nangong Wan has been removed. The Reincarnation Palace Master replied with a faint smile. In that case, won't he be able to guess that you allowed all of this to happen and develop a grudge against you? Yuan Chunfeng asked. Perhaps, but it's not like that's going to change the final outcome. The Reincarnation Palace Master replied with an unconcerned smile. Ali. Somewhere in the Dragon Abyss Immortal region was an ancient forest, within which Han Li and Nangong Wan were standing together at the foot of a huge parasol tree. What's wrong? Nangong Wan asked. The two of them had agreed to travel to the Azure Abyss continent, so that they could use the teleportation formation there to travel to the Middle-earth Immortal region. But for some reason, Han Li had suddenly descended into this forest along the way. As opposed to answering her question, Han Li carefully inspected his surroundings for a moment, following which his gaze settled upon a gray rock nearby. A moth was resting on the rock, and upon catching sight of it, Han Li harumphed coldly. First, it was a blade of grass, then a fish, then a sparrow, and now a moth. Are you not tired of spying on us? In the next instant, a streak of translucent light shot out of his eye, and the moth instantly exploded into a puff of dust. A surprised and perplexed look appeared on Nangong Wan's face as she asked, Why do I sense reincarnation, law power fluctuations from that moth? You should ask the Reincarnation Palace Master that. Han Li harumphed coldly, then carefully inspected Nangong Wan's body for a moment before reaching out for the back of her neck. Nangong Wan leaned into his hand, and a burst of faint, golden light flashed over his palm. Nangong Wan felt a slight, burning pain, but only for a fleeting moment before it subsided. Did he plant a mark on me? She asked as her brows furrowed slightly. Just like that moth from before, these were most likely all measures taken by the Reincarnation Palace Master to protect you. I presume that if Feng Qingshui had tried to harm you in any way, he would have been able to instantly teleport to your side and intervene. However, Such measures are no longer necessary now that I'm with you, Han Li replied with a smile. A surge of warmth welled up in Nang Gongwan's heart upon hearing this, and she replied with an affectionate smile. What's in the past can all be left behind. What's important now is that we're together. Unfortunately, some people refuse to leave us in peace, Han Li sighed. Then let's leave this place. Let's go back to the spirit realm, or the mortal realm, or anywhere else, Nang Gongwan said as she latched onto Han Li's hand. It's no use. Over the years, I always thought that I had been living according to my own wishes, that I was the master of my fate, that no matter how difficult things became, at least I had my free will. However, I've since then come to realize that the influence of fate is truly ever-present, Han Li said with a wry smile. I don't believe in fate. If it does exist, then I have to thank it for reuniting us, Nang Gongwan replied. That's certainly something to be thankful for, Han Li mused with a warm smile, one that was returned by Nang Gongwan. Now that I'm at the peak great encompassment stage, I'm becoming more and more able to sense the conflicting great Taos of myself and Gu Huijin. I'm beginning to be able to see the river of time, and he's like the deity that rules over the river, while I'm like a sneaky thief trying to dig out a channel to redirect the river elsewhere, Han Li said. If you can sense him, then surely he's also aware of you, Nang Gongwan said in a concerned manner. That's definitely true. It appears that there are countless paths that can be taken in one's cultivation, but ultimately all of those paths narrow to a single one. If you're lucky, there will be no one else at the end of the path, but if you're unlucky, then a showdown will be inevitable, Han Li mused. Nang Gongwan could see that his mind was already made up, so she didn't try to sway him any further. I won't be able to help you much, but I'll remain by your side through thick and thin, Nang Gongwan declared with a resolute look in her eyes. No, my trip to the heavenly court is bound to be one that's fraught with peril. I can't let you take the risk with me. Han Li immediately refused with a firm shake of his head. In Gan Rushwang's memories, she stood against Gu Huijin with the reincarnation palace master, and even though she ultimately met her demise, she had no regrets. This time, I'm also going to stand by your side. If we lose, then I'll be there with you to the bitter end, and if we win, then I want to see your triumph with my own eyes, Nang Gongwan insisted in a determined manner. Looking into Nang Gongwan's determined eyes, Han Li didn't have the heart to turn her down again. In the end, he sighed as he acquiesced. After this close call, I feel like I won't be able to leave you anywhere without being constantly worried. Perhaps the most dangerous place is the safest place. Only when I'm by your side can you avoid distractions and focus on the task at hand, Nang Gongwan said with a smile. If you insist on coming with me, then once we enter the Middle-earth Immortal region, you have to stay in the Flower Branch domain at all times unless it's absolutely necessary for you to come out, Han Li said in a serious manner. All right, I can do that, Nang Gongwan replied with a firm nod. Han Li's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and he laid his hands on Nang Gongwan's shoulders as he carefully inspected her gorgeous features with eyes that were brimming with affection. What are you looking at? Nang Gongwan asked in a low voice as she averted her gaze with a faint blush on her face. You're still just as captivating to me as when I first saw you, Han Li said with a smile. I don't recall you being captivated by me when we first met, when we were facing that flood dragon. Nang Gongwan's voice abruptly cut off here as she realized that she had misspoken, and the flush in her cheekers became even more pronounced. Han Li enveloped her in a gentle embrace as a reminiscent look appeared in his eyes, and he said, Come to think of it, I have to thank that flood dragon. If it wasn't for that thing, you and I wouldn't have. Shush, Nang Gongwan hurriedly interjected as she pressed a finger against Han Li's lips to silence him. Even though they were already Tao partners, she still felt extremely embarrassed whenever she thought back to those events of the past. The light of the sun filtered through the forest, basking the two of them in a warm and pleasant sensation. The occasional bird chirp rang out within the trees, and the mountain breeze resembled gentle hands caressing over their bodies. The two of them enjoyed this rare moment of peace in silence, immersed in each other's warm embrace. Ali, half a month flew by in a flash. The mortal realm under the southern forest Immortal region was the smallest and most infertile of all of the mortal realms. The realm was almost entirely inhabited by mortals with no cultivation base to speak of, and even those who were born with any amount of cultivation aptitude were extremely rare. Due to the severe lack of the world's origin chi in the realm, there were barely any spirit plants or cultivation resources to be found. As a result, even core formation cultivators were considered to be extraordinary cultivation prodigies here, while nascent soul cultivators were seen as godlike beings. In this mortal realm, battles against cultivators were extremely rare. After all, it was extremely difficult just to cultivate at all here, so the few cultivators that did exist were very averse to any risk. However, on this day, the number one immortal sect of the realm's northern origin nation, the Hidden Mountain sect, came under the attack of a sworn enemy. The enemy in question was only a mid-core formation cultivator, while the leader of the Hidden Mountain sect had already reached the late core formation stage several decades ago, so this should have been a complete suicide mission. However, the intruder was able to kill all of the disciples of the sect using a bone flute, with which he was controlling a large swarm of powerful insects, the most prominent of which were 28 infantile gold-devouring beetles. Before long, all that was left of the Hidden Mountain sect were its leader and several severely wounded elders, all of whom were ordered to make their way to the sect's ancestral hall by the intruder. The leader of the Hidden Mountain sect was a short man with a childlike appearance, and his entire right arm was missing, having been devoured by the 28 gold-devouring beetles. I'll admit that it was an oversight on our part that resulted in your failed breakthrough, but you didn't have to go this far. The sect leader yelled as he turned to the man with the bone flute with a furious expression. The man stopped playing the flute, and the swarm of insects under his control temporarily drew to a halt. Given how sparse the world's origin chi in this realm is, you've most likely robbed me of my only chance of reaching the nascent soul tier in this lifetime. Am I supposed to just let that slide? The man asked in a cold voice. Even so, you've already completely destroyed my sect, so surely you've done enough, the sect leader pleaded. It's still not enough. You have to die for your Hidden Mountain sect to be truly ruined, the man with the bone flute said in a cold voice, then began blowing on his flute again, and the surrounding swarm of insects instantly began converging toward the remaining Hidden Mountain sect cultivators at his behest. Right at this moment, a burst of faint rumbling rang out for a moment before fading away, and no one paid it any notice. However, all of a sudden, a disturbance suddenly ran through the swarm of insects, and the entire swarm erupted into a chaotic frenzy. The man with the bone flute was very alarmed to see this, and he hurriedly channeled his spiritual power to try and regain control over his spirit insects. However, that only seemed to make matters worse, and all of a sudden, all of the spirit insects turned on him, led by the 28 gold-devouring beetles. A blood-curdling howl rang out, but it was quickly silenced, and within mere moments there was nothing left of the man, with his entire body devoured down to the very last strand of hair. All of the Hidden Mountain sect cultivators were stunned to see this, but fortunately for them, the spirit insects displayed no intention of attacking them, and they quickly flew away into the distance. Having just inexplicably survived what they had thought would have surely been their final moments, the Hidden Mountain sect cultivators were left staring at one another with flabbergasted looks on their faces. Meanwhile, a spatial rift that was several hundred feet in length had been torn open above a majestic mountain in the mortal realm, and swarms of spirit insects of all descriptions were converging from all directions before flying into it. However, almost all of them were instantly torn to shreds by the spatial power within the rift, and only the several dozen gold-devouring beetles remained unscathed. Ali. High flourish immortal region, bollworm sect. A belly of an entire mountain range that was enshrouded in a vast cloud of miasma had been virtually completely dug out, and there were countless maze-like passageways within, leading to thousands of palaces. At this moment, there were countless creatures with human bodies and ant heads rushing through the passageways in a busy manner. In a massive underground palace in the deepest part of the maze-like system laid an enormous white ant queen. Its lower body was rotund and white like a silkworm, yet its upper body was no different from that of a human, complete with a stunningly beautiful female face. Right at this moment, a burst of faint tremors suddenly swept through heaven and earth, and the Ant Queen's eyes abruptly sprang open as a look of incredulity and elation surfaced in her eyes. Could it be? It has to be, she yelled in a frantic manner, then abruptly took on a fully human form. In this form, she was a young woman in a white sheer dress, and her aura indicated that she was at the late great encompassment stage. "Guards!" she yelled in an authoritative voice, and a group of 8 figures instantly rushed to the palace before each falling to one knee. "The day that we've been waiting for has finally arrived. Prepare for march," the Ant Queen ordered. The 8 figures were ecstatic to hear this, and they quickly began mobilizing everyone in the giant ant colony. On this day, the high flourish immortal region witnessed the large insect tide in the history of its existence. It was as if all of the spirit insects in the entire immortal region had suddenly decided to emerge, but as opposed to attacking any cities, all of them converged toward the peak of the tallest mountain in the immortal region, where a gargantuan spatial rift had appeared. The Northern Glacial Immortal Region. The northernmost region of the infernal frost continent was an inhospitable land that was enshrouded in ice and snow all year round, and the hostile conditions meant that there were barely any living beings residing here. At this moment, a massive and indistinct blue shadow could be seen through a raging snowstorm on the summit of a tall, icy mountain. All of a sudden, a faint crack rang out, and huge chunks of ice began tumbling down from the mountain to reveal a giant cocoon that was tens of thousands of feet tall. A faint tearing sound rang out as the cocoon abruptly burst open, and a vast expanse of glacial chi erupted out of it, freezing the entire surrounding snowstorm solid. A white-haired man with a pair of long feelers extending out of his forehead flew out from within the cocoon. It was a thin and handsome man with a pair of eyes that glowed like sapphires, giving off a unique sense of allure. The man was clad in a suit of blue leather armor, and there were 4 wings of blue light on his back. Most astonishing of all was his aura, which was at the peak great encompassment stage, and he looked up into the heavens as he murmured to himself, "My queen, have you finally returned?" In the next instant, he vanished from the spot with a flap of his wings. Ali. Somewhere in the heavenly court. Inside a giant palace that looked as if it had been carved out a single, enormous piece of green jade, was a tall and imposing man. He had a head of short hair, a set of intimidating facial features, and his dark green robe was bulging over his incredibly muscular build. At this moment, the man was packing back and forth in front of a jade throne with a grim look on his face. Standing before him were several divine officials of the heavenly court, all of which were great encompassment cultivators, but at this moment they were all displaying respectful expressions that were tinged with a hint of fear. The man packing before them was Xuanyuan Jai, the essential Earth Tao ancestor and one of the 7 heavenly Tao lords. You're telling me even Tong Qiu was assassinated along with Immortal Lord Hu Liang? Xuan Yuanjai asked in a cold voice. All 8 reincarnation envoys have been deployed in groups of 2 to hunt down all of the powerful cultivators traveling to attend the Badhai banquet, and both of them were targeted. One of the divine officials hurriedly replied as he fell to his knees, while his companions lowered their heads in a tense and fearful silence. The demise of Immortal Lord Hu Liang wasn't of much concern to Xuan Yuanjai, but Tong Qiu was the son of one of his acquaintances. Have you found out which 2 of the reincarnation envoys did it? Xuan Yuanjai asked. It was Yan Zhuo and Xuan Yu. They made no attempt to hide their identities, and they even demolished the ancestral hall of Tong Qiu's sect, so it looks like they don't fear retaliation from the heavenly court, the divine official replied. Find out where they are, kill them, and bring their souls to me, Xuan Yuanjai ordered. The divine officials were just about to respond when Xuan Yuanjai's expression suddenly changed slightly, and all of them instantly fell silent as their hearts leaped into their throats. All of a sudden, Xuan Yuanjai burst into laughter. I didn't think you would be able to make it back to this point. Let me see how you're going to get away this time. The divine officials had no idea what was happening, so they remained in a fearful silence. Lu Qingshan, Zhao Yao, go and find out Yan Zhuo and Xuan Yu's whereabouts. Everyone else come with me, Xuan Yuanjai ordered, and the divine officials immediately gave a collective affirmative response. Ali. Dragon Abyss Immortal Region, Azure Abyss Continent. There was not a single cloud anywhere in sight in the clear blue sky, and the sea down below was just as clear and vibrant. 2 streaks of light were racing through the air, leaving a long, golden trail in their wake. Within the streaks of light were none other than Han Li and Nangong Wan, and the former had disguised himself as a man with bushy eyebrows and a large beard, while Nangong Wan remained without a disguise. Once we get to the Azure Abyss continent, you'll enter the Flower Branch domain, while I go into the teleportation pagoda on my own to travel to the Middle-earth Immortal region, Han Li said. Isn't it going to be too dangerous for you to travel to the Middle-earth Immortal region using the Heavenly Court's teleportation formation? Nangong Wan asked with slightly furrowed brows. It'll be fine. I have a Badhai token in my possession, so they won't scrutinize me too closely. On top of that, I'm sure they would have never expected that I would dare to do this, Han Li reassured. I suppose, Nangong Wan replied with a nod, but it was clear that her concerns hadn't entirely abated. Shortly thereafter, the coastline of the Azure Abyss continent came into view on the horizon, and right at this moment, a burst of peculiar energy fluctuations swept through the air from up ahead. Han Li immediately stopped in his tracks and positioned himself in front of Nangong Wan as he cast his gaze forward. In the sky above the coastline was a vast expanse of black light, within which was a chaotic gathering of spirit insects. A perplexed look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. Within mere moments, the expanse of black light had already flown several hundred kilometers closer to them, presenting a harrowing sight to behold. The entire expanse of black light was crammed full of spirit insects of all descriptions ranging from several inches to thousands of feet in size. An insect tide of just a single species wouldn't have been much cause for interest, but there were millions of spirit insects of all types of species intermingled together here, and that was very strange. Something's not right, Han Li murmured. What's wrong? It's just an insect tide, is it not? Nangong Wan asked. Normally, insect tides only contain a single species of spirit insects. However, there are countless species here, some of which are natural enemies of one another that would have normally been sure to fight to the death on sight. So it's very strange that they're coexisting so peacefully together, Han Li explained. All of a sudden, the swarm of insects parted as a giant, golden beetle flew out from within their ranks, and it was a gold-devouring immortal that was close to the pinnacle of the high zenith stage. "Wait here for me for a second," Han Li said with slightly furrowed brows, and before she had a chance to reply, he had already vanished from the spot. In the next instant, he appeared directly before the swarm of insects, and it looked as if he were about to be inundated. However, a golden spirit domain then erupted out of his body, encompassing the entire surrounding area within a radius of close to 100,000 kilometers. All of the spirit insects were instantly immobilized within the time spirit domain, while even the sea down below had fallen completely still. Han Li made his way through the insect tide, quickly arriving in front of the gold-devouring immortal, then pressed a finger against its glabella to send a streak of translucent light vanishing into its head. After taking a moment to examine the gold-devouring immortal's memories, his eyes sprang open as he exclaimed, "How could she have not told me about this? She's always so reckless." Immediately thereafter, he returned to Nangong Wan's side in a flash. "What's wrong?" Nangong Wan asked. "It looks like Jin Tong is about to make a breakthrough, and these spirit insects are traveling to her side," Han Li replied. "Is she about to reach the late great encompassment stage?" Nangong Wan asked. "No, she's going to attempt a breakthrough to become a Tao ancestor," Han Li replied with a shake of his head, and Nangong Wan was stunned into silence upon hearing this. Jin Tong was split off from a Tao ancestor to begin with, so she's able to progress in her cultivation simply by devouring her brethren. As a result, she doesn't need to sever any corpse souls, and the speed of her progression depends solely on how quickly she's able to encounter and devour other gold-devouring immortals, Han Li explained. "Isn't that a good thing? Why do you look so worried?" Nangong Wan asked. "Similar insect tides to this one are most likely arising across all of the immortal regions, and that's inevitably going to attract the attention of the heavenly court," Han Li mused. "What are you planning to do then?" Nangong Wan asked as a look of concern appeared in her eyes as well. "I have to go help her," Han Li said. "I agree, but do you know where she is right now?" Nangong Wan asked. "I don't have to. I can simply follow this insect tide," Han Li replied. "That's a good idea. I'm sure it'll make for a spectacular sight once all of the insects' tides from all of the immortal regions combine into one," Nangong Wan said. "Let's go. Time is of the essence," Han Li said, then latched onto Nangong Wan's hand before flying onto the gold-devouring immortal's back. After that, he withdrew his time spirit domain, and the insect tide was instantly able to advance as normal again. Somewhere in the extra heaven sphere, there was an incredibly dark and pure expanse of space that was filled with spatial storms, which would occasionally clash against one another to produce spectacular light displays. On the edge of a massive spatial storm was an even more enormous black cloud that was moving as if it were a living creature, and beams of light were shining out of it in all directions as if it were a light tower. The black cloud was formed by extra-realm heavenly devils, but for some reason it was currently pressed tightly against the spatial storm, unwilling to stray even a single inch from it. Hovering in the boundless space several 100,000 kilometers away was a golden beetle that was hundreds of thousands of feet in size, and it was giving off an unfathomably powerful aura, alongside a vast expanse of dazzling, golden light. Any asteroids that dared to stray too close to it were instantly wiped out of existence by its aura even tens of thousands of kilometers away. And laid out around the golden beetle were numerous spatial rifts that resembled windows in a dark room. The smallest of those rifts were hundreds of feet in size, while the largest were thousands of times more massive, and they were connected to countless immortal regions. At the moment, there were countless spirit insects surging into the extra heaven sphere through most of the spatial rifts, but the spatial pressure in the extra heaven sphere was so immense that most of the spirit insects were completely pulverized as soon as they arrived. Even so, countless more spirit insects continued to fly in without any regard for their own safety. There were some powerful beings among them that were able to withstand the spatial pressure, and they flew over to the golden beetle's side, where they were able to enjoy the protection of the golden light radiating from its body. There were also many gold-devouring beetles interspersed among them, and they instantly disintegrated into bursts of pure power that surged into the giant golden beetle's body after flying into the golden light. As more and more spirit insects flew into the extra heaven sphere, the swarm of insects around the golden beetle grew larger and larger, forming an asteroid belt-like structure around it. Among all of the spatial rifts, there was one through which a vast snowfield was visible. Standing in the snowstorm was a white-haired man with a pair of long feelers on his forehead, and he was barely discernible from the snow around him. A smile appeared on the man's face as he rose up into the air, following which a burst of indistinct white light erupted out of his hands before surging into the spatial rift. Immediately thereafter, the burst of white light expanded drastically, forcibly expanding the rift from only dozens of feet in size to over 1,000 feet, and the man flew through it into the extra heaven sphere. In the instant that he did so, a burst of white light appeared over his body to ward off the oncoming spatial storms, and he immediately flew over to the golden beetle before falling to one knee as he greeted in an excited voice, "Shuang Bai welcomes the return of his queen." As soon as his voice trailed off, a young woman in a white sheer dress stepped out of another spatial rift with several hundred humanoid ant beings behind her. Outside the spatial rift were countless more humanoid ant soldiers clad in suits of black armor, forming a formidable and well-disciplined army. "Given how lazy you are, I thought Qing Feng would be the one to get here first, but you've surprised me," the young woman said with a smile as she turned to the white-haired man. In response, Bai Shuang merely gave a curt nod as he said, "Long time no see, Yi Jiao. You're still all by yourself and as cold and unapproachable as ever. Having said that, you've certainly made some significant progress in your cultivation base," Yi Qiu remarked in a surprised manner. During Kelin's battle against the Heavenly Court, most of the 8 most powerful subordinates under her command had perished, and she recalled that Shuang Bai had suffered extremely severe injuries at the time. "I already failed to protect our queen once, so I naturally had to do everything in my power to ensure that I can pull my weight upon her return," Shuang Bai replied. Right at this moment, a barely audible voice suddenly rang out from Shuang Bai's shoulder. "How long has it been since we were last together?" Yi Jiao and Shuang Bai were both quite startled to hear this, but they quickly relaxed once they recognized the voice. A faint buzzing sound rang out as a tiny cuckoo wasp rose up from Shuang Bai's shoulder, then transformed into a tall man in a suit of azure leather armor. The man appeared to have been around 40 years of age with a head of curly, shoulder-length hair that spilled down behind him in an unkempt fashion. There was a weary look on his face, as well as a messy stubble, giving him the appearance of a hungover drunkard. His most noteworthy feature was his eyes, as there was a circle of golden patterns around each of his pupils, presenting a mesmerizing sight to behold. The armor-clad ant soldiers behind Yi Jiao immediately stepped forward to surround the man, only to be instructed to stand down. "Looks like you've honed your laws of concealment even further, Qing Feng. Neither of us was able to sense you at all. When did you get here?" Shuang Bai asked. "I immediately came here after sensing our queen's call," Qing Feng replied. "Has our queen given you any instructions?" Yi Jiao asked. "No, she hasn't spoken to me at all since I arrived," Qing Feng replied. As soon as his voice trailed off, a projection of a woman drifted out of the golden beetle, and it was none other than Jin Tong. "We pay our respects to the esteemed insect ancestor," Qing Feng's trio exclaimed in an ecstatic manner as they fell to their knees. I'm going to attempt to return to my Tao ancestor status today, and I want all of you to protect me if any enemies of mine choose to attack at this critical juncture, Jin Tong said. We will defend you with our lives, the trio replied with ecstatic and determined looks in their eyes. Jin Tong nodded in response, then faded back into the golden beetle's body. All of a sudden, the golden light emanating from the golden beetle's body became blindingly bright, and bursts of very special law power fluctuations began to sweep through the surrounding air. Those law power fluctuations surged into the surrounding spatial rifts, and the spirit insects that were converging from all of the immortal regions instantly erupted into a frenzy, tearing their way out of the spatial rifts with renewed urgency. At this point, all of the great encompassment stage gold-devouring immortals in existence had already been devoured by Jin Tong, so all of the gold-devouring beetles that were flying out of the spatial rifts were at the high zenith stage or below. Xuanyuan Jai is not just going to sit back and watch, so we have to be prepared, Qing Feng said. We have to stop him this time, even if it costs us our lives, Shuang Bai said with a cold look of resolve in his eyes. I'll get everyone into formation. You two keep an eye on the spatial rifts to make sure no enemies sneak in, Ye Jiao said. I'll go get rid of those pesky heavenly devils over there, Qing Feng said as he turned his gaze to the massive, black cloud in the distance, and the weary look on his face abruptly faded away as he spoke, following which he instantly vanished from the spot. He's become even more powerful than before, Ye Jiao murmured to herself with a look of mixed emotions in her eyes. Out of the three of them, she had been the one that had sustained the least severe injuries during the previous showdown against Xuanyuan Jai. Yet right now, she also possessed the lowliest cultivation base of the three. Shuang Bai could see the guilt and dejection in her eyes, and he consoled, "Don't worry about it. You've always been more proficient in the art of formations and formations, so stick to your strengths." Ye Jiao nodded in response, then flew up into the air until she was directly in front of the golden beetle, and all of the ant soldiers behind her hurriedly followed along. After some instructions were issued, all of the ant soldiers dispersed and mingled themselves into the mighty spirit insect army that had gathered around the golden beetle. Before long, the chaotic insect tide had been organized into groups by Ye Jiao and were standing at attention like a well-trained army. As more and more spirit insects flew in from the different immortal regions, an enormous spirit insect formation began to take shape. Meanwhile, a cloud of glacial white mist surged out of Shuang Bai's body in all directions along with his spiritual sense, as he kept a close eye on all of the surrounding spatial rifts. As time passed, the insect army became more and more enormous, and all of them either possessed powerful innate abilities or formidable cultivation bases, allowing them to withstand the spatial pressure in the extra heaven sphere to arrive by Jin Tong's side. Under Ye Jiao's command, all of these insects formed a massive formation that resembled a giant scorpion, with one pincer that was white and giving off fearsome glacial chi, while the other was dark green and burning with green flames. On the tip of the scorpion's raised tail was a curved stinger that was giving off a sharp gleam. At this point, the golden light around Jin Tong had become so dense and opaque that it was no longer possible to see her within it. The ball of golden light resembled a bright jewel that was sitting on the giant scorpion's back, releasing bursts of formidable suction force in all directions. Right at this moment, a thunderous sound resembling that of a giant gong being struck rang out from within the ball of light, and a projection of Jin Tong emerged to hover above it. She began to chant an incantation while spreading her arms open as if she were embracing the world, and a golden vortex appeared in front of her chest before connecting to the ball of golden light down below like a funnel. Immediately thereafter, the surrounding spatial rifts began to tremble violently, and countless gold-devouring beetles came flying out of all of them in a frenzy, forming a series of golden waterfalls that plunged into the vortex. It was as if an incandescent golden sun had appeared in the extra-heaven sphere, illuminating the entire area within a radius of millions of kilometers. Yijiao was standing on the giant scorpion's head, and she turned back to observe this breathtaking spectacle with irrepressible excitement on her face, and she was so moved that tears had even begun welling up in her eyes. Shuangbai also appeared beside her from a cloud of white mist, then murmured to himself, "We've waited for what felt like an eternity, but this day has finally come." Yijiao turned to him and asked, "Where's Qing Feng? Is he still not back?" "Extra-realm heavenly devils are not so easy to deal with, but he should be back soon," Shuangbai replied. Yijiao was just about to respond when she suddenly turned an alarmed gaze toward the largest of the surrounding spatial rifts, while Shuangbai had already vanished from her side and was racing toward the same spatial rift. However, before he was able to get there, a mountain that was around 1,000 feet tall had already flown out of the rift to appear in the extra-heaven sphere. As opposed to recklessly opposing the oncoming mountain herself, she rose up into the air while instructing the giant scorpion down below to raise its massive pincers in a defensive posture. High up in the sky, Shuangbai clasped his hands together into a seal before thrusting it toward the mountain. A cloud of glacial mist took shape before him, then formed a massive, white palm teeth that fell upon the mountain. A resounding boom rang out as the mountain exploded violently into countless snowflake-like white particles. However, that was far from the end of the ordeal. All of a sudden, a pair of enormous, green, jade-like hands extended out of the massive spatial rift, gripping onto its edges before forcefully pulling them apart. A burst of thunderous rumbling rang out as the spatial rift was completely torn apart by the pair of green hands, expanding it into a spatial passageway that was close to 100,000 kilometers in size. Immediately thereafter, a giant head poked its way out of the spatial passageway before looking around, then erupted into booming laughter. "Found you." Immediately thereafter, the enormous figure suddenly pulled back, following which a gargantuan cliff slowly emerged from the spatial passageway. "Xuanyuanjai." A grim look appeared on Shuangbai's face as he watched the cliff slowly emerge from the spatial passageway. It was a long and thin continent that was tens of thousands of kilometers in size and laden with hundreds of thousands of hostile, armor-clad heavenly court cultivators, led by none other than Xuanyuanjai. "Long time no see, Yijiao," Shuangbai. "I recall there was a guy called Qing Feng that also survived, wasn't there? Where did he go? I don't think you cowardly little bugs would ever dare to show your faces again," Xuanyuanjai chuckled. "Don't get cocky, Xuanyuanjai. Once our queen returns to her Tao ancestor status, the heavenly court will have one fewer Tao ancestor," Yijiao yelled. "What a joke! She couldn't do anything to me even back when she was a Tao ancestor. Right now, she's not even a Tao ancestor, so what could she possibly do? I'm going to capture all of you here and present you as a gift during the Badhai banquet," Xuanyuanjai declared as he cast his gaze toward the ball of golden light that Jin Tong was situated in. Shuangbai wasted no time with words as he plummeted toward the cliff like a shooting star. A layer of blue light emerged over his body, and gusts of fierce wind began howling around him as countless incredibly thin silken threads were sent racing toward the cliff amid a ferocious snowstorm. In the blink of an eye, the entire cliff was inundated by the massive snowstorm, and countless silken threads within it hurtled directly toward Xuanyuanjai. However, before they were able to reach him, a burly man wielding a pair of spears and clad in a suit of silver armor stepped forward to position himself in front of Xuanyuanjai. A silver spirit domain erupted out of his body, and a massive, shield-like mirror of silver light appeared within it. As the snowstorm swept over the silver mirror, a burst of radiant, silver light instantly appeared over its surface, and the snowstorm was reflected, sending it sweeping toward Shuang Bai instead. A hint of concern flashed through Yi Jiao's eyes, as Shuang Bai was inundated by the snowstorm. The spear-wielding cultivator's name was Yin Wuxuang, and he was a peak great encompassment cultivator under Xuanyuan Jai. He was a cultivator of the laws of silver, a branch of metal law powers, and he was a very formidable combatant. However, right at this moment, a layer of frost suddenly appeared over the silver mirror without any warning, following which it exploded with a loud crack. Countless silken threads shot out of the flurry of crystalline powder that the mirror had exploded into, intertwining in midair to form a white spear that pierced directly toward Yin Wuxuang's throat. A surprised look appeared on his face as he raised one of his spears horizontally to protect himself while thrusting the other one forward. It looked as if there were nothing directly in front of him, but in the instant that he thrust his spear forward, a dull thud rang out as Shuang Bai abruptly appeared. Blood was trickling down from the corner of his lips, and the silver spear had already pierced through his chest. A cold sneer appeared on Yin Wuxuang's face upon seeing this, but in the next instant, Shuang Bai's body disintegrated into countless silken threads, and he hadn't been harmed at all. Yin Wuxuang's brows furrowed slightly as a torrent of what appeared to have been molten silver erupted out of his spear, spilling over Shuang Bai's body to instantly encase him and root him to the spot. However, Shuang Bai remained completely unfazed as he made a hand seal, and countless translucent white threads abruptly shot out from beneath Yin Wuxuang's suit of silver armor, instantly tearing his body to shreds. Having freed himself from Yin Wuxuang's entrapment, Shuang Bai immediately released his spirit domain, and a massive, snowy mountain appeared within it in the blink of an eye before crashing down toward the cliff below. As the snow mountain descended, the snow on its surface came tumbling down upon Xuanyuan Jai in an almighty avalanche. Shuang Bai was naturally well aware that he was no match for Xuanyuan Jai, and he was only doing this to try and buy as much time for Jin Tong as possible. Meanwhile, Yin Wuxuang's body had disintegrated into a puddle of molten silver that was in the process of reforming. Useless. An azure-robed elderly man standing behind Xuanyuan Jai scoffed upon seeing this, then stepped forward as he swept a sleeve through the air. The opening of his sleeve instantly swelled several hundredfold in size, and bursts of tremendous suction force erupted out of it to redirect the tumbling avalanche. And after no more than 20 seconds, the avalanche and the entire mountain had been sucked into his sleeve. Right at this moment, a loud commotion rang out in the distance, and a series of extremely profound, vortex-like patterns began to appear over the ball of golden light on the giant scorpion formation's back, while a terrifying, all-devouring aura began to emanate from within. Yi Jiao was ecstatic to see this, while all of the heavenly court cultivators displayed looks of alarm and horror in the face of this terrifying aura. A grim look appeared on Xuanyuan Jai's face as he ordered, "Everyone, attack at once." As soon as his voice trailed off, a burst of white light suddenly appeared over the center of the continent, upon which the heavenly court cultivators were standing. Shuang Bai had snuck there unnoticed, and he thrust his palms into the ground as his entire body disintegrated into countless translucent threads that vanished into the earth. A layer of frost instantly spread the entire continent, and Yi Jiao clasped a hand into a fist in elation upon seeing. However, the situation quickly took a turn for the worse. A burst of earthy yellow light rose up over the entire continent, alongside a wave of formidable earth law power fluctuations, and the entire continent began to ripple like a wave. Immediately thereafter, a patch of flat ground at the center of the continent suddenly rose up to form a giant, rocky hand, held within which was none other than Shuang Bai. Shuang Bai, Yijiao yelled in an alarmed manner. Not only was Shuang Bai being held firmly in the rocky hand, his entire body was bound by a series of dark yellow chains that contained formidable earth law powers. They were only around as thick as an infant's arm, but they were as heavy as mountains, rendering him completely immobilized. At the same time, his law powers were suppressed by this burst of earth law powers, and the layer of frost over the entire continent quickly faded away. A woman in a purple dress standing behind Xuanyuan took a glance at Yi Jiao, then said, "Leave the rest to us, esteemed patriarch. Yi Jiao on her own isn't enough to pose any threat." "Make it quick," Xuanyuan said in an expressionless manner. Yin Wushhuang, the azure-robed elderly man, and the woman in the purple dress immediately sprang into action, leading the army of heavenly court soldiers on a charge against the insect army. An anxious look appeared on Yi Jiao's face as she took a glance at the devilish cloud in the distance. Shuang Bai had been captured, while Qing Feng still wasn't back, leaving just her and her scorpion formation, which certainly wasn't going to be enough to keep the heavenly court's forces at bay. "So be it, I'll just have to resist for as long as I can." A look of resolve appeared on Yi Jiao's face as she let loose a sharp screech, one that was immediately echoed by the scorpion formation behind her. All the while, the swarms of spirit insects that were still on their way here began to frantically fly into the extra heavenspeher through the spatial rifts with renewed urgency. The two fearsome armies clashed violently, and a battle of epic proportions instantly commenced. The spirit insects held a numbers advantage, but the quality of the heavenly court cultivators more than made up for this disadvantage. Yin Wushhuang thrust his spears through the air to release two giant pillars of silver light, instantly killing tens of thousands of spirit insects, while the azure-robed elderly man swept a sleeve through the air to suck in over 100,000 spirit insects in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the woman in the purple dress swept a sleeve through the air to conjure up a sea of purple flames, which instantly reduced hundreds of thousands of spirit insects to ashes. The three of them left the rest of the heavenly court cultivators behind as they charged directly toward Jin Tong. Yi Jiao had been keenly observing the trio this entire time, and she immediately flew onto the head of the scorpion formation, following which her lower body reverted back into its ant-queen form before fusing as one with the giant scorpion below. Specks of light began to rise up from all of the spirit insects in the formation, and an almighty aura that transcended beyond the peak great encompassment stage began to emanate from within. They were burning through their own life force to provide energy to the formation. Yi Jiao's eyes began to glow with white light, and it seemed that she had completely fused as one with the formation, losing her sense of self in the process. With a sweep of her hands, the two scorpion pincers lashed out at once. A burst of formidable glacial chi swept through the air, instantly sealing the azure-robed elderly man in ice, while a vast wave of green flames surged toward the woman in the purple dress, clashing violently against her wave of purple flames. The green flames seemed to have possessed some type of sticky quality, quickly fusing as one with the purple flames, and devouring them before continuing on toward the woman in the purple dress. The wall of ice and the sea of flames resembled a pair of impermeable gates that stood before Jin Tong. Meanwhile, Yin Wushhuang was flying through the air from above, and he wisely decided not to try and force his way through after taking a glance at the curved stinger of the giant scorpion down below. It was clear that the scorpion formation was far more powerful than the three of them had anticipated. Xuanyuan's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. He didn't want to have to get involved, as using law powers would speed up his assimilation with the heavenly Tao. But if the battle dragged on for too long and Lin was allowed to recover her status as a Tao ancestor, then that would make things even more troublesome. "Get out of the way," he yelled as he suddenly took a step forward, and a burst of earthy yellow light appeared over his clenched fist before forming an enormous yellow vortex. Right at this moment, Ching Feng appeared behind him without any warning with a dark green corkscrew spike in his hands, which he thrust viciously toward the back of Xun Yuanjai's head. He had already eradicated the extra-realm heavenly devils in the distance, but he had refrained from scattering the devilish cloud so that he could use it as cover in preparation for this sneak attack. The corkscrew spike in his hands was his bonded treasure, and it was an extremely rare third-tier immortal treasure. If his attack were to land as intended, then he would surely be able to inflict an injury upon Xun Yuanjai. However, right at this moment, the yellow vortex around Xun Yuanjai's fist suddenly vanished, while a metallic gleam appeared over the back of his head. An alarmed look appeared on Ching Feng's face upon seeing this, and he hurriedly sprang back through the air, abandoning his sneak attack on Xun Yuanjai as he landed beside the giant, rocky hand that Shuang Bai was trapped in. With a slash of his corkscrew spike, the law chains around Shuang Bai were severed. Following, Ching Feng grabbed onto him by the collar and tugged him out of the grasp of the giant hand. Xun Yuanjai made no effort to stop him from saving Shuang Bai. Instead, a look of approval appeared on his face as he said, "Your concealment law powers are quite impressive. Even I didn't notice you at first, but your mistake was setting foot on this continent." A look of realization appeared on Ching Feng's face upon hearing this. Given his mastery of the laws of concealment, he could remain undetected even by a Dao ancestor like Xun Yuanjai as long as he remained in the air. But as the Earth Dao ancestor, it naturally stood to reason that he was able to detect Ching Feng as soon as he set foot on the ground. Hence, he had no choice but to abandon his plan of assassinating Xun Yuanjai to rescue Shuang Bai instead. "I have no time for the two of you now, but once I've killed your master, I can spare your lives and allow you to serve me," Xun Yuanjai said, then swept a sleeve through the air, and the entire continent instantly began trembling violently as massive waves of yellow earth converged toward Ching Feng and Shuang Bai from all directions. Even with the wave of earth still thousands of feet away, Ching Feng and Shuang Bai found themselves slowed down significantly by a burst of restrictive force, and they were quickly inundated. Xun Yuanjai paid no further heed to them as he turned his attention back to the scorpion formation, while charging up power in his fist again. Layers of earthy yellow light that were imbued with tremendous earth law powers began to surface over his upper body, causing the entire surrounding space to tremble. Immediately thereafter, he let loose a thunderous roar as he thrust his fist forward, and the yellow vortex of earth law powers that had taken shape around his fist instantly swelled to around 100 times its original size, racing toward Jin Tong as an almighty storm. All of the heavenly court cultivators hurriedly took evasive measures upon seeing this, while the insect army continued to advance, meeting the yellow storm head-on. In the blink of an eye, millions of spirit insects were erased from existence upon entering the storm. Shuang Bai and Ching Feng were unable to free themselves from the waves of earth, and their expressions changed drastically upon seeing this. Yi Jiao was on the receiving end of the attack, so she had a much clearer sense of just how unfathomably fearsome it was, and a sense of despair welled up in her heart as she steeled her resolve in preparation to face the oncoming storm. A defiant roar erupted from between her lips as the white light in her eyes grew brighter and brighter. She had set her own law powers alight, and all of the spirit insects in the scorpion formation were also burning through their life force with renewed urgency. It was only now that the scorpion formation finally displayed its full power, and all of the spirit insects within had already vanished, leaving only specks of bright light in their place. The azure and white light radiating from the scorpion's pincers also became brighter than ever, and a sea of fire and ice was sent sweeping toward the yellow vortex. An ear-splitting boom rang out as the opposing bursts of law powers clashed, causing the entire space to warp before collapsing to form a gargantuan black hole, which sucked in all of the white frost and green flames. In that instant, what little light there was in the extra-heaven sphere was devoured by the black hole, plunging the entire surrounding area into absolute darkness. Only after close to 20 seconds had passed did the black hole gradually fade away, and the veil of darkness was lifted. At this point, the scorpion formation was already nowhere to be seen, and all of the spirit insects within had disintegrated into nothingness. All that remained was Yi Jiao, who was still hovering before Jin Tong with only half of her body intact. "I did it," she exclaimed with blood trickling down from the corner of her lips, and in spite of the terrible physical condition that she was in, her eyes were glowing with elation. However, in the next instant, her elation was dashed as a gargantuan, yellow fist projection erupted out of the space ahead, racing toward her with incredible speed. She remained where she was, making no effort to take any evasive measures. Seeing as she was unable to protect her master, the only thing that she could do now was perish with her. Yi Jiao closed her eyes in acceptance of her fate. She had already run away once, and she had no intention of doing it again. The entire space was beginning to collapse upon itself in layers in the face of the vast sea of earth law powers sweeping through the air, and Qing Feng and Shuang Bai could only look on in despair and desperation from afar. However, right at this moment, a high zenith stage gold-devouring Immortal suddenly flew out of a spatial rift above Yi Jiao, and sitting on its back was none other than Han Li. As soon as he arrived in the extra-heaven sphere, he immediately sprang up into the air in an agile manner, then descended in front of Yi Jiao before sweeping a sleeve through the air. A massive projection of his mantra-treasured axis instantly took shape, and all of the time Tao runes on its surface lit up as it released a huge pillar of light that crashed toward the yellow fist projection. The two clashed violently, but it was a completely silent clash. It was as if the fist projection had struck a ball of cotton, and even though it hadn't been harmed in the slightest, it was gradually being slowed down somehow. Immediately thereafter, Han Li released his 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, which plunged tip first into the giant fist projection like a flight of golden dragons. An earth-shattering boom rang out as countless arcs of golden lightning exploded in unison, tearing the fist projection into countless pieces. Yi Jiao's eyes sprang open in astonishment upon sensing this, only to be greeted by the sight of a completely unfamiliar human cultivator. "Who are you?" Xuanyuanjai asked, his voice booming from the distant continent. "I am Han Li," Han Li declared with his hands clasped behind his back. As soon as his voice trailed off, the golden axis projection flew back to his side before hovering behind him, while his 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords circled around him in a protective formation. "Han Li, what a pleasant surprise. I'm not sure if I should praise you for your courage or denounce you for your stupidity," Xuanyuanjai harumphed coldly. Clearly, he was already aware of Han Li's existence. "You're Xuanyuanjai, right? You were the one who forced Jin Tong to scatter her own body all those years ago, is that right?" Han Li asked. "Jin Tong, you mean Kalin. Who is she to you?" Xuanyuanjai asked in a surprised manner. "She is my spirit pet," Han Li replied. "How dare you refer to our insect ancestor as your spirit pet?" Yi Jiao immediately protested in a furious manner. "Cut the chit-chat and focus on your own recovery. I can only handle Xuanyuanjai, so you'll have to keep all of the other heavenly court cultivators at bay," Han Li said. Yi Jiao was rendered speechless as she detected the rising aura emanating from Han Li's body. Who is he? How could he possess such formidable time-law power fluctuations? Forget it, I don't even know why I bothered to ask. In any case, now that you're here, I'll just have to get rid of you as well as a little added bonus, Xiunyuanjai sneered. Han Li offered no response as he swept a sleeve through the air, conjuring a giant time spirit domain that encompassed the entire surrounding area in a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. All of the heavenly court cultivators were instantly slowed down to a crawl. In addition to Yin Wuxuang's trio, there was a small handful of them that were still able to move relatively freely, but they were also far slower than before. Xiunyuanjai maintained an expressionless facade, but internally, he was stunned by Han Li's power. What the hell is Gu Huijin doing, allowing this bastard to cultivate the laws of time to this extent? Additionally, this only made him more determined to kill Han Li here. With a sweep of his sleeve, the entire floating continent began to race toward Han Li like a battleship. In response, Han Li made a hand seal, and his 72 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords immediately shot forth toward Xiunyuanjai as streaks of sword light. Xiunyuanjai brought his palms together before thrusting them forward, and two bursts of yellow light appeared before him. In the instant that all of the flying swords pierced into the yellow light, they were immediately diverted away, as if they had just slid over a smooth, icy surface. All of a sudden, Han Li launched himself toward Xiunyuanjai at an extraordinary speed, enhanced by his reversal true axis ability. Xiunyuanjai was ecstatic to see this. A direct clash played right into his hands, and he was more than happy to see Han Li trying to fight fire with fire. However, in the instant that the two of them were about to clash, a flurry of lightning suddenly flashed over Han Li's body, and he instantly vanished from the spot. In the next instant, he abruptly reappeared, standing atop one of the azure bamboo cloudswarm swords that had just been diverted away by Xiunyuanjai earlier. Xiunyuanjai immediately swung around as a wary look surfaced in his eyes. He could tell that Han Li seemed to have just employed some type of instantaneous teleportation ability that was related to his flying swords, rather than through using his time law powers. Upon arriving on the continent behind Xiunyuanjai, Han Li joined his middle and index fingers before slashing them through the air, and a burst of golden light that was imbued with time law powers instantly swept through the air, forming a golden wave that swept over most of the continent. The waves of earth surging over the continent were instantly suppressed by this burst of time law powers, allowing Shuang Bai and Qing Feng to free themselves. "Go and protect Klin. Leave Xiunyuanjai to me," Han Li said. Qing Feng and Shuang Bai exchanged a glance with one another, and they were still a little displeased by Han Li's flippant remark about their insect ancestor being a mere spirit pet of his. But given the urgency of the situation, they naturally prioritized Jin Tong's protection first. With that, the two of them were reunited with Yi Jiao, and fierce battle ensued between them and Yin Wuxuang's trio. As for the rest of the heavenly court cultivators, the vast majority of them were still rooted to the spot by Han Li's spirit domain. "What makes you think a mere great encompassment cultivator like yourself can stand up against me?" Xiunyuanjai scoffed as he swept a sleeve through the air, and a burst of yellow light instantly rose up over the entire continent beneath Han Li's feet. The yellow light was giving off immense suction force that rooted him firmly to the spot, following which Xiunyuanjai raised a fist to the heavens before bringing it down in a swift and forceful motion. A thunderous commotion instantly rang out from deep within the extra heaven sphere, and Han Li looked up to see thousands of asteroids of different sizes crashing down toward him, drawn down by some type of immense power. The descending asteroids were creating so much friction with the surrounding space that they erupted into crimson flames, resembling a storm of shooting stars under the backdrop of the dark sky. All of these shooting stars were enhanced by Xiunyuanjai's Earth Law powers, granting them tremendous power. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he channeled his heavenly baleful purgatory arts as all of his profound acupoints lit up, following which he was able to forcibly tug his leg out of the yellow light emanating from the ground below. Xuanyuanjai was rather surprised to see this, but he immediately reacted as he joined his palms together. Two mountains instantly rose up over the floating continent on either side of Han Li, then came rumbling toward him from either side. Han Li had only just freed one of his legs when he was crushed between the two mountains with a deafening boom, and the entire continent trembled violently as the pair of mountains crumbled in unison. A look of disappointment appeared in Yi Jiao's eyes upon seeing this. She didn't know who Han Li was to Jin Tong, but it was clear that he had come to her, and his demise most likely meant that the end was near. Immediately thereafter, a series of gaping spatial rifts appeared over the sky above the continent, and the storm of asteroids came crashing down amid a thunderous commotion. The entire continent was inundated by the storm of fiery asteroids, which fell continuously without rest for close to 20 seconds. After the dust settled, it was revealed that all of the mountains and landmarks on the continent had been razed to the ground, leaving it riddled with countless charred craters, some of which were still alight with scorching flames. Xuanyuanjai took a pleased glance at his own handiwork, yet right as he was about to turn his attention to Jin Tong, his gaze suddenly snapped back to the point where the two mountains had previously collided. The ground there trembled violently as a massive figure slowly stood up from the scorched earth, spreading its 6 arms to dust itself off before casting its 3 pairs of eyes toward Xuanyuanjai. That barely tickled. It's time for you to get a taste of my fists now, Han Li's 3 heads declared in unison as he channeled his great 5 elemental illusion mantra while adopting a fist stance, raising his 6 fists in a menacing display. At the same time, 5 different types of time, law powers began to rapidly gather around him before fusing together. Xuanyuanjai could sense that Han Li was preparing some type of extremely formidable attack, one that he didn't dare to take lightly, and he immediately joined his palms in front of his own chest before closing his eyes. As soon as he did so, rays of yellow light instantly began to radiate from his entire body before fading away into the surrounding air. At the same time, he began to give off a very peculiar aura. Even though his body was still hovering in the same spot as before and was fully visible, Han Li was struck by the false feeling that he wasn't there at all. This was Xuanyuanjai's Tao ancestor body, a manifestation of his great Tao. Is this what happens after one becomes integrated with the heavenly Tao? Han Li thought to himself with a hint of awe in his eyes. However, this was not the time to be overawed. The 5 types of time law powers around him had already fully combined, and a series of black lines had also begun to surface over his body. All of his time law treasure manifestations appeared on his back, and they were radiating bright, golden light. With a thunderous roar, Han Li lashed out with his 6 giant fists in unison, conjuring up countless black and golden fist projections that hurtled through the air. The barrage of fist projections appeared before Xuanyuanjai almost instantaneously, but right as they were about to strike him, his eyes abruptly sprang open, and his pupils had disappeared, leaving behind only solid panels of earthy yellow light that appeared a little hollow, but contained boundless power. The might of the great Tao is not something that you can oppose with brute strength alone. Xuanyuanjai roared as he slowly thrust a palm forward, and the entire surrounding space instantly shuddered violently. A vortex emerged over the palm of his hand with boundless yellow light surging out of it, forming a massive, golden wall that was sent racing toward Han Li. Han Li's great 5 elemental annihilation fist struck the golden wall with tremendous power before instantly exploding, sending incredibly fearsome shockwaves sweeping through the air in all directions. The golden wall shuddered as countless massive cracks appeared over its surface, but it didn't shatter. Instead, it reflected the destructive shockwaves to send them sweeping back at Han Li. Having just unleashed his great 5 elemental annihilation fist, Han Li wasn't in time to take any evasive measures, and he was sent flying back through the air. Behind the golden wall, Xuanyuan Jai wasn't faring that well, either. His entire body was basked in the time-law power fluctuations from the detonated Great 5 elemental annihilation fist, instantly rooting him to the spot as a result. Right at this moment, the 72 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords that had made their way behind him at some point transformed into 72 delicate, jade-like children that raced through the air on their own to form a sword formation. Immediately thereafter, they reverted back into a series of giant flying swords, each of which was around 1,000 feet in length, and a rumbling thunderclap rang out as a gargantuan heavenly gate appeared within the inky darkness. The heavenly gate was surrounded by constantly churning golden clouds, and even though the gates were tightly shut, there was still an extremely formidable aura of lightning emanating from within. Yin Wushwang was astonished to see this from afar. How is this possible? He's a cultivator of time-law powers. How is he able to command such formidable lightning law powers solely through the use of a sword formation? Unbeknownst to him, every single one of Han Li's azure bamboo cloudswarm sword was a third-tier immortal treasure that had absorbed the law powers of the lightning Q's eye. A third-tier immortal treasure was something that was out of reach even for the average great encompassment cultivator. So these 72 flying swords were the equivalent of 72 great encompassment cultivators combining their powers in a collaborative effort. Even as Han Li was still flying back through the air, the heavenly gate slowly opened at his behest, and an almighty waterfall of golden lightning came gushing out from within, while countless lightning worms of different colors raced toward the gates with lightning beads clasped in their mouths. A chorus of deafening thunderclaps rang out as countless gaping spatial rifts appeared in the face of the heavenly gate's unmatched power, and Han Li steadied himself before bringing his hands down in a forceful motion. The restrictive forces within the heavenly gates instantly faded away, and as a result, the countless lightning worms inside were no longer restrained as they came bursting out of the sea of golden lightning in a frenzy. In the blink of an eye, the entire area was inundated by a vast and fearsome sea of lightning. "Protect the insect ancestor," Qing Feng yelled, and the three of them immediately disengaged themselves from their battles against Yin Wushwang's trio to rush to Jin Tong's aid. At this point, the golden vortex around her had already vanished, and there were also no longer any gold-devouring beetles flying in through the surrounding spatial rifts, indicating that all of the gold-devouring beetles across all of the immortal regions had already returned to her. However, for some reason, she was still unable to overcome the final hurdle to reclaim her status as a Dao ancestor. Meanwhile, Yin Wushwang's trio hurriedly sprang back in retreat, clearly very fearful of the spreading sea of lightning. All of the heavenly court cultivators that were still able to move also fled in all directions in a blind panic, while those who were not so fortunate were quickly inundated. Countless lightning worms of different colors were swimming through the sea of lightning, converging toward Xuanyuan Jai with unstoppable might. The lightning beads clasped within their mouths were imbued with the purest lightning true intent between heaven and earth, and a look of fierce killing intent flashed through Xuanyuan Jai's eyes upon seeing this. "If I don't kill you here, you'll surely grow into a threat just as potent as the reincarnation palace master someday." As soon as his voice trailed off, he clasped his hands into a seal as he began chanting an incantation. The entire extra-heaven sphere seemed to have begun resonating with Xuanyuan Jai's incantation, and all of the space within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers abruptly fell still for an instant while a burst of loud rumbling rang out from all directions. Han Li immediately sprang up into the air with an alarmed expression, right as the floating continent beneath him completely exploded, disintegrating into a vast body of Earth law powers that came together to form a river of yellow light. With a swing of Qiunyuanjai's fist, the entire yellow river was sent sweeping toward the oncoming sea of lightning. Countless lightning worms raced headfirst into the yellow river, before exploding into enormous lightning vortexes that erupted in all directions, and the darkness of the extra-heaven sphere was illuminated once again. High up in the sky, lightning vortexes of all types of different colors stirred up the river of Earth law powers into a frenzy, while enormous whips of lightning lashed out in all directions, annihilating the surrounding space. All of the remaining heavenly court cultivators hurriedly flew into the spatial rifts that led to the immortal regions for self-preservation. The shockwaves resulting from this clash were so formidable that even the space around Jin Tong was beginning to shatter, and Yi Jiao's trio had combined their powers to create a spherical light barrier to try and ward off the shockwaves. But the light barrier clearly wasn't going to be able to last much longer, either. Meanwhile, Han Li abruptly vanished from the spot before reappearing beside one of his azure bamboo cloud-swarm swords, and with a sweep of his sleeves, all 5 of his time law treasures flew out of his body. All of a sudden, an entire world seemed to have taken shape within the extra-heaven sphere, complete with celestial bodies and a lush mountain range with a river flowing through it. The 5-elemental illusory world had encompassed the entire surrounding space within a radius of millions of kilometers, and the pressure on Yi Jiao's trio was significantly lessened, but the 3 of them were still supporting the spherical light barrier with all their might, not daring to let their guards down. "You've successfully infuriated me, Han Li. Let me show you the true might of a Tao ancestor," Qiunyuanjai declared in a rumbling voice that echoed like thunder. "I look forward to it," Han Li replied with a relaxed smile. A sense of intense admiration welled up Yi Jiao's heart as she witnessed the faint smile on Han Li's face from afar. In her eyes, the gulf between a great encompassment cultivator and a Tao ancestor was simply insurmountable, particularly when the Tao ancestor in question was one that was so formidable that he had even outmatched the insect ancestor of old. Countless years had passed since then, and Qiunyuanjai's powers had become even more unfathomable. In Yi Jiao's eyes, Han Li's fate was already sealed from the moment he decided to challenge Qiunyuanjai, and the fact that he was able to smile in spite of this was a reflection of his courageous heart and noble spirit. In reality, Han Li's palms were currently sweating profusely. He was only putting on this composed display in order to further infuriate Qiunyuanjai, as only by bringing out Qiunyuanjai's full power could he hope to defeat him. Some time later, the sea of lightning and river of yellow light faded away, leaving behind gaping black holes that refused to close. Qiunyuanjai began to advance through the air, and with each step that he took, a wave of golden light would spread beneath his foot, accompanied by a deafening boom. At this moment, his eyes were completely hollow and devoid of emotion, and 2 strange-looking runes could be seen within them. Layers upon layers of energy fluctuations that were invisible to the naked eyes were spreading through the air with every single step, proliferating outward to what appeared to have been infinity and beyond. Han Li knew that those energy fluctuations were imbued with the true meaning of Earth. In this instant, it was as if Qiunyuanjai's body had become one with the Earth, while his will had become one with the heavenly Tao. All of a sudden, Qiunyuanjai stopped in his tracks, and a burst of immense suction force erupted out of his body, acting upon the entire surrounding extra-heaven sphere. He spread his arms open as a layer of golden light began to ripple over his entire body, and there was no sense of humanity left in his aura. Instead, he resembled an ancient deity that had existed for as long as heaven and earth had been in existence. However, as opposed to dismay, a hint of excitement appeared in Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. "This is it,"